Chapter 454. The immortal devil and demon realm was vast and boundless. Among them, the most mysterious dark star realm was divided into three great sections. Of the three great sects, the Gold Punishment sect was the leader. As for the Gold Punishment star, it was the sacred star of the Gold Punishment sect. It was also one of the three great sacred stars of the Dark Star realm. Gold Punishment star. There was only a single super-large city on the entire Gold Punishment star. A large number of experts lived in this city. The roads were wide and unobstructed. Numerous streets crisscrossed through this city. Beside the streets were countless buildings of varying heights. In this city, there were places to spar, places to relax, places to eat and drink. The Gold Punishment star was extremely flourishing. It was comparable to the best cities in the immortal realm and the devil realm. People are coming and going on the street. Chinyu, wearing a black robe, is one of them. Quietly walking on the streets, Chinyu's footsteps appeared to be slow. However, in a few steps, he reached the end of the street. After that, Chinyu changed his direction and continued onward. Chinyu's target was the Sacred Mountain. At the core of the Gold Punishment Star City was a 10,000-meter tall mountain. This mountain towered in the center of the city. At the summit of the mountain was the headquarters of the Gold Punishment sect. Gathered here were the upper echelons of the Gold Punishment sect. This included the leader of the three great sovereigns of the Dark Star realm, the Gold Punishment Lord. He also lived here. This 10,000-meter tall sacred mountain occupied an extremely vast area. The cultivators in the city all consciously stayed away from the sacred mountain. The sacred mountain was an important place. Ordinary people were not allowed to enter. At this moment, Chinyu had already arrived at the foot of the sacred mountain. A mountain within a city, it's truly imposing. The corners of Chinyu's mouth rose slightly. He then began to walk toward the sacred mountain's mountain path. There were guards at the foot of the sacred mountain. Seeing Chinyu's arrival, they shouted from afar. "This is the sacred mountain. Outsiders are not allowed to enter." Chinyu did not bother with superfluous words. He directly took out his 15-star Emperor level title plate. Upon seeing the title plate, the guard immediately became respectful. "Lord Lu Xing, the Great Elder has already given the order. Lord Lu Xing has arrived. Everyone is to be allowed to pass." "You know that I'm Lu Xing?" Chinyu was slightly puzzled. The guard said respectfully, "Currently, the only Gold Punishment sect cultivators who have been awarded 15-star Emperor-level tokens are Lord Lu Xing and Lord Wenfeng." "I know Lord Wenfeng. Since Lord Wenfeng is able to display a 15-star Emperor-level title plate, you are naturally Lord Lu Xing." Chinyu couldn't help but laugh. It turned out that the only 15-star Emperor-level experts in the Gold Punishment sect that had been granted title plates were Wenfeng and himself. Chinyu climbed up the stairs step by step. Chinyu didn't fly or travel at top speed. Instead, he slowly climbed the mountain and carefully observed everything in the holy mountain. The mountain path of the sacred mountain was very winding, passing through forests, rivers, and even the belly of the mountain. The sacred mountain covered an area of several hundred miles. Many of the ancient trees on the mountain were thousands of meters tall, and their trunks were so thick that it would take dozens of people to wrap their arms around them. There were also some animals growing on the mountain. However, Chinyu was unable to distinguish the species of most of these animals. They were very different from the animals of the purple mystic star. Chinyu suddenly saw a ray of light shooting down from the sky. When the figure landed, it became clear. It was the law enforcement team's captain, Wenfeng, who had interacted with Chinyu before. Wenfeng had a smile on his face. "Lu Xing, so you're still here. The Great Elder and I received a message from the guards below and waited for you outside the sect's main hall. Who would have thought that after waiting for so long, we still couldn't find you even after searching with our soul power. Thus, we followed the mountain path and rushed down to look for you. Who would have thought that after such a long time, you'd only covered half the distance?" Wenfeng said snappily. Chinyu couldn't help but smile. "Wenfeng, I didn't know you were waiting there. Furthermore, while climbing the mountain, I discovered that the scenery of the sacred mountain was pretty good. Thus, I began to enjoy the scenery along the way. I'm truly sorry Fortunately, I came down to look for you. If we had followed the Great Elder's instructions and continued to wait, with your speed, you really would have had to wait until nightfall to reach the peak. Wen Feng said with a smile, "Let's go. Don't look around anymore. There will be plenty of time to look around in the future." Qin Yu nodded. "Then I'll follow you quickly." Qin Yu and Wen Feng both turned into rays of light, drawing two arcs as they shot towards the peak of the sacred mountain. Qin Yu and Wen Feng landed. In front of them was an open space filled with green grass. There were also many cultivators cultivating on the open space. Behind the open space was a majestic hall. The hall's aura was so magnificent that it was worthy of being the Gold Punishment sect's main hall. This is the green grass field, a place where the sect's disciples often cultivate and exchange pointers. The palace behind it is the front hall of the Gold Punishment sect. The main hall is behind the front hall, Wen Feng said, pointing to the distant palace. Qin Yu nodded his head. However, in his heart he was astonished. Earlier, he had thought that the palace before them was the main hall. Never had he imagined that it was only the front hall. The scenery of the sacred mountain is pretty good. There are 17 mountains with similar heights in the surroundings. The buildings on the mountains are all quite unique. Qin Yu glanced around. The mountain where the Gold Punishment sect's front hall, main hall and other important buildings were located was not the tallest. Instead, it was one of the lower mountains among the 18. Wen Feng also looked to the 17 surrounding mountains. With a smile on his face he said, "Of the 17 surrounding mountains, 7 of them have side halls built on them. Those are private residences. As for the other 10 mountains, they are collectively owned by the Gold Punishment sect." Qin Yu nodded his head. The side halls on those 7 mountains respectively belong to His Majesty, the Gold Punishment Lord, the 3 Vice Sect Masters, the Great Elder, the Guard Elder and me, the Great Leader of the Enforcement Squadron. Wen Feng's words allowed Qin Yu to understand. These 7 mountains belong to the 7 big shots of the Gold Punishment sect. Wen Feng said with a smile, "Lu Xing, as you are the consecrated this time around, the sect will definitely arrange a consecrated side hall for you. After all of the other 10 mountains, there are only 2 usable buildings. As for the other 8 buildings, they are all side halls left behind by His Majesty, the Gold Punishment Lord. They were only left behind to commemorate him." Qin Yu shook his head and said with a smile, "There's no need. I can just find a place to stay." "How could that be?" Wen Feng immediately shook his head and said, "Lu Xing, it would appear that you still do not know the significance of the position of consecrated. Throughout history, the Gold Punishment sect's 15-star Emperor-level experts were all qualified to compete for the position of Gold Punishment Lord. As for the rule throughout history, if there is no position for a 15-star Emperor-level expert, then they will be consecrated. Consecrated status is comparable to Vice Sect Masters. It's just that they do not have much to do. So that's the case?" Qin Yu asked. "This Gold Punishment sect only has Vice Sect Masters. Why isn't there a Sect Master? Could it be that the Gold Punishment Lord is the Sect Master?" This was also Qin Yu's guess. After all, the Sect Master of the Gold Punishment sect was nominally the person with the highest status in the Gold Punishment sect. If such a person existed, then what would the Gold Punishment Lord be? "That's right." Wen Feng nodded his head and said with a smile, "The Gold Punishment Lord is actually the Gold Punishment Lord. There are 3 Vice Sect Masters. It's also for the sake of better managing the various origin movement planets." Wen Feng, a red-haired old man, walked over from the grassy plain ahead. "I was waiting over there. Yet, you were chatting with Lu Xing here." My apologies, Great Elder," said Wen Feng with a smile. Then he turned to Qin Yu and said, "Lu Xing, this is Great Elder Fu Lan. Great Elder Fu Lan is in charge of many things. To put it simply, he is in charge of intelligence." Great Elder Fu Lan felt helpless. Then he turned to Qin Yu with a beaming smile and said, "Lu Xing, my name is Fu Lan. You can address me as Fu Lan." Great Elder Fu Lan, hello. Qin Yu lightly nodded his head. "Consecrated Lu Xing, I am extremely happy that you're willing to come to the sacred mountain to take up the position of consecrated. Merely, His Majesty is likely going to be vexed. That's because he wants to arrange for the construction of your residence, consecrated Lu Xing, said Great Elder Fulan with a smile. Qin Yu shook his head. He did not wish to speak about this anymore. Great Elder Fulan, I wonder if you could arrange for me to meet with His Majesty. Qin Yu directly asked. Him coming to the sacred mountain, to take up the position of consecrated? How could that be possible? Wasn't it all for the sake of that passage title plate? Great Elder Fulan nodded his head and said, Of course. In fact, you will be able to meet His Majesty very soon. In that case, bring me there. Qin Yu did not wish to waste time. Great Elder Fulan said to Wenfeng with a smile. Wenfeng, look, Lu Xing is already in a hurry to meet His Majesty to obtain the position of consecrated. Wenfeng also nodded his head and looked to Qin Yu. In order to truly become a consecrated, one must obtain the official decree of the Gold Punishment Lord. As of now, Qin Yu has yet to become a consecrated. I am looking for His Majesty for an important matter. Qin Yu explained. Great Elder Fulan, please lead the way. Great Elder Fulan did not say much. He nodded his head and said, Follow me. At this moment, His Majesty is in the conference hall. As he said those words, Great Elder Fulan began to walk in front. As for Qin Yu, he followed Great Elder Fulan side by side with Wenfeng. Lu Xing, exactly what are you planning to do? Asked Wenfeng. In Wenfeng's heart, Qin Yu was an interstellar cultivator. Even with his profound strength, he did not seek fame. Thus, he did not believe that Qin Yu had come to obtain the position of consecrated. Thus, he most definitely had some important matter. I wish to enter the Bewitching God Temple. Qin Yu directly gave the answer. Merely, I do not have a passage title plate. You wish to enter the Bewitching God Temple? Right now. Wenfeng opened his eyes wide. What's wrong? Is there something strange about it? Said Qin Yu with a smile. Wenfeng said in puzzlement. There are indeed many divine artifacts in the Bewitching God Temple. However, with your current cultivation, I reckon that only high-quality divine artifacts would be of use to you. Furthermore, it is extremely difficult to find high-quality divine artifacts in the Bewitching God Temple. Wenfeng had thought that Qin Yu was truly a 15-star emperor. However, he did not know that Qin Yu's body had already reached 17-star emperor level. Even high-quality divine artifacts would be of no use to him. Furthermore, with Qin Yu's current comprehension of the spatial laws, even high-quality divine artifacts would be of no use to him. The barriers surrounding the Bewitching God Temple are divine barriers. They are extremely powerful. Lu Xing, it's best that you don't enter them. Wenfeng advised. Qin Yu smiled and shook his head. How could Wenfeng possibly know that Qin Yu possessed the Bewitching God painting? Furthermore, Qin Yu did not care about those divine artifacts surrounding the Bewitching God Temple at all. What he truly cared about was the inner palace of the Bewitching God Temple, the core of the Bewitching God Temple. Qin Yu had seen the Cyan Emperor's strength before. The Cyan Emperor's strength was so powerful that even the current Qin Yu did not have certainty in being able to handle him. After all, even the Pung Demon Emperor was unable to move in front of the Cyan Emperor. There was no need to doubt the Cyan Emperor's strength. The reason why the Cyan Emperor was so powerful was all because of the treasures within the Bewitching God Temple. According to Qin Yu's estimation, it might be that the Cyan Emperor was lucky enough to obtain a treasure that was left behind from the inner palace of the Bewitching God Temple. The inner palace of the Bewitching God Temple. Qin Yu was determined to obtain it. Sai, forget about it. I won't try to persuade you anymore. It's not that simple to enter the Bewitching God Temple. Merely the passing title plate required the approval of all three sovereigns. Wenfeng said from the side. When Qin Yu heard the words required the approval of all three sovereigns, he was unable to refrain himself from frowning. This was indeed something that gave Qin Yu a headache. At this moment, Qin Yu and Wenfeng, under the guidance of Great Elder Fulan, had already walked a long distance. The three of them had already passed through the front palace and the main palace. At this moment, Qin Yu and them had arrived outside of an ordinary courtyard. Lu Xing, this is the conference hall. His Majesty and them ought to be inside, said Great Elder Fulan with a smile. Qin Yu nodded. However, right when Great Elder Fu Lan pushed open the door opened by itself. After the door opened, a person walked out from the inside. It was a short and rotund middle-aged man. This short middle-aged man cast his gaze toward Qin Yu and said, "This must be Lu Xing, right?" Qin Yu nodded his head. His consciousness immediately detected the strength of the person before him. 12-star Emperor level. Wen Feng said from the side, "Lu Xing, this is one of the 3 vice sect masters of our gold punishment sect, Vice Sect Master Kofeng. Vice Sect Master Kofeng has been the Vice Sect Master for a very long time. Currently, the majority of the sect's affairs are managed by Vice Sect Master Kofeng." Vice Sect Master Kofeng. Qin Yu slightly bowed. "Let's go, His Majesty is waiting inside." A cordial smile appeared on Kofeng's plump face. He pulled Qin Yu's hand and walked inside. Qin Yu slightly frowned. He was not used to being held by others, especially by a man. Qin Yu slightly moved his hand, and then pulled it back. This was actually a small technique that Qin Yu used to control space. Kofeng turned his head around to take a glance at Qin Yu in shock. He simply did not feel Qin Yu using any strength, and Qin Yu's hand had already slipped out of his grasp. Kofeng did not believe that his grip was loose. This Lu Xing was no ordinary person, Kofeng thought in his heart. After that, Kofeng continued to walk forward with a smile on his face. After passing through the front courtyard, they entered a relatively spacious hall. At this moment, there were 4 people in the hall. Only a single person was sitting on the main seat. Without a doubt, this person was most definitely the person with the highest status in the Dark Star realm, the leader of the 3 great sovereigns, the Gold Punishment Lord. Qin Yu walked into the hall. The 4 people in the hall all cast their gazes toward Qin Yu. As for Qin Yu, he also cast his gaze toward the Gold Punishment Lord. There was no respect in Qin Yu's eyes. He merely calmly looked at the Gold Punishment Lord. Humph. A cold snort sounded in the hall. Chapter 455. Hearing the cold snort, Qin Yu turned around to look at the source of the snort. The person who let out the cold snort was a cold and indifferent middle-aged man. His pair of ice-cold eyes contained viciousness and savagery. What a ruthless person. Qin Yu still had a tranquil smile on his face. The strength of the person before him could be considered to be pretty good. He was a 17-star emperor. Merely in terms of body cultivation, he was on par with Chu Feng. Unfortunately, if they were to truly fight, Qin Yu was confident that he would be able to take care of his opponent in a single round. Lu Xing, this is Vice Sect Master Lu Lan. Vice Sect Master Lu Lan has reached 17-star Emperor level. He is the number 2 expert in our Gold Punishment sect. Great Elder Fu Lan immediately said. The person beside Vice Sect Master Lu Lan is Vice Sect Master Bao Yu. Of the 3 great Vice Sect Masters, you should know the last one. He is Vice Sect Master Kofeng. As for this person, he is our Gold Punishment sect's highly respected guardian elder. In the main hall, the Gold Punishment Lord Xingyuan was seated on the main seat. On the right-hand side of the Gold Punishment Lord were 3 seats. The 2 great Vice Sect Masters, Lu Lan and Bao Yu, were seated on them. There was also an empty seat. Qin Yu guessed that it was Vice Sect Master Kofeng's seat. On the left-hand side of the Gold Punishment Lord were 4 seats. They were occupied by the Guardian Elder. As for the other 3 seats, they were all empty. Qin Yu knew that those ought to be the seats for Wen Feng, the Great Elder and himself. Qin Yu merely bowed slightly, and said indifferently, Lu Xing pays his respects to Vice Sect Master Lu Lan, Vice Sect Master Bao Yu and Guardian Elder. Immediately after, Qin Yu no longer looked at Lu Lan. Instead, he looked to the Gold Punishment Lord Xingyuan. He bowed slightly and said, Lu Xing pays his respects to your majesty. Qin Yu's expression and words all displayed his proud and aloof personality. When ordinary people saw the Gold Punishment Lord, they would all bow and say your majesty. However, Qin Yu merely bowed slightly and said my majesty. The difference between the 2 words was enormous. Consecrated Lu Xing is truly too arrogant. Vice Sect Master Lu Lan said with a sneer. However, Qin Yu completely ignored this Vice Sect Master Lu Lan. Vice Sect Master Lu Lan's face immediately changed. This Lu Xing was actually ignoring his existence. How could he not be furious? Back then, Lu Lan had wanted to become the Gold Punishment Lord. Unfortunately, he was a level weaker than Xing Yuan. That was why he became the vice sect master. Other than Xing Yuan, he had never thought highly of anyone else. Lu Xing's temper might be a bit arrogant. You shouldn't take it to heart. The Gold Punishment Lord Xing Yuan spoke. Lu Lan shot a cold glance at Qin Yu and said no more. Qin Yu didn't care about the blue sulfur at all. He knew that the blue sulfur didn't affect him at all. Lu Xing, I am very happy to hear that you have come to the sacred mountain. I originally thought that you would continue to work hard on your cultivation and not care about this position, Xing Yuan said with a faint smile. Xing Yuan's face was very angular. Even though he was sitting there, he gave off a feeling of being as heavy as Mount Tai. Thus, no one dared to look down on him in the slightest. Your Majesty, Lu Xing has come to the sacred mountain to accept the position of consecration. However, the true reason why he has come here is not the position of consecration, Wen Feng said with a smile. At the same time, he looked to Qin Yu. Qin Yu took over the conversation, nodded and said, Your Majesty, the reason why I have come to the sacred mountain is because I hope that Your Majesty can bestow upon me a passage title plate to enter the Bewitching God Temple. Bewitching God Temple? Lu Lan, Bao Yu, Ko Feng and the others, including the Gold Punishment Lord, were all shocked. Even the guard elder, who had been resting with his eyes closed the entire time, opened his turbid eyes and took a glance at Qin Yu. Then he continued to close his eyes. Bewitching God Temple. Although there are divine artifacts there, with your strength Lu Xing, you shouldn't need any divine artifacts. As for high-grade divine artifacts, the possibility of obtaining them is very low. Vice Sect Master Bao Yu said. Qin Yu remained silent. How could these people possibly know what Qin Yu was relying on? Lu Xing, the three great sovereigns of our Dark Star realm, have already made a rule that the Bewitching God Temple would normally be closed. Only once every 100,000 years will the Bewitching God Temple be opened. Gold Punishment Lord Xing Yuan explained with a frown. Qin Yu frowned. How long until the next opening of the Bewitching God Temple's entrance? Qin Yu asked. The last time it opened was over 60,000 years ago. There are still over 30,000 years until the next opening. Great Elder Fulan replied. Over 30,000 years? Qin Yu was simply unable to wait that long. Qin Yu immediately said, Your Majesty, it is said that the entrance to the Bewitching God Temple was sealed by the three great sovereigns using their inherited treasures. Only the passage title plates refined by the three great sovereigns can be opened. I wish to request Your Majesty to help me open it once. May I know what sort of request Your Majesty needs in order for me to agree? Qin Yu's question had clearly displayed his determination to enter the Bewitching God Temple. It is not that I am unwilling. As you are a consecrated of our Gold Punishment sect, I am naturally able to agree to your request. Merely, the two great sovereigns of the Black Flame sect and the White Profound sect might not necessarily agree to it. The reason why they made this rule, sealed it, and allowed everyone to enter the Bewitching God Temple every 100,000 years, is because of two reasons. Firstly, it is to prevent people who are not from our Dark Star realm from forcibly entering the Dark Star realm. Secondly, it is to ensure that the divine artifacts in the Dark Star realm are still under the control of our three factions. Qin Yu's heart relaxed slightly. Since Your Majesty has agreed to it, why don't you invite the Black Flame Lord and the White Profound Lord over to discuss it? Qin Yu said sincerely. Gold Punishment Lord Xing Yuan lightly smiled and nodded. Very well, I will invite the two of them. Merely, the possibility of them agreeing is very low. The Black Flame sect and the White Profound sect have been competing with us the entire time. Lu Xing is already extremely grateful that Your Majesty is able to invite the other two great sovereigns over. If we are unable to reach an agreement, then Lu Xing will have no choice but to give up on entering. Qin Yu said with a smile. Since you are prepared to fail, then this matter will be easy to handle. The Gold Punishment Lord's impression of the Lu Xing in front of him became a lot better. The Gold Punishment Lord Xing Yuan was a person with a very good temper. Everyone who had interacted with Xing Yuan knew that. Even though he had become a great sovereign, Xing Yuan still did not have the airs of a great sovereign. Very well, let's not waste any more time. I will now officially bestow upon you the position of consecration. The Gold Punishment Lord suddenly stood up. Immediately, the several people who were still seated also stood up. At this moment, Qin Yu also bowed in a very well-mannered manner. The same sort of etiquette as the cultivators of the Dark Star Realm. He placed his left fist on his right chest and bowed. Accept it. The Gold Punishment Lord Xing Yuan placed 2 items before Qin Yu. Thank you, Your Majesty. Qin Yu received the 2 items. These 2 items, one was an imperial decree, and the other was the title plate of consecration. That imperial decree was a piece of cloth made of special silk. At the very least, its toughness was comparable to that of a top-quality immortal artifact. Wen Feng, bring Lu Xing to the ancient ancestor palace and the inheritance palace to have a look, said the Gold Punishment Lord with a light smile. Wen Feng stood up. Yes, Your Majesty. The front palace, the main palace, and a series of other palaces were constructed on the main peak of the sacred mountain. At the same time, there were also many residences for cultivators. As for the 17 mountains surrounding the main peak, 7 of them were private residences. As for the other 8, they were residences of the previous generations of Gold Punishment Lords. The remaining 2 were the most important palaces of the Gold Punishment sect. These 2 places were respectively the Ancient Ancestor Palace and the Inheritance Palace. The Ancient Ancestor Palace occupied an extremely vast area. It occupied nearly 70% of the entire mountain. As for Qin Yu and Wen Feng, they were currently outside the entrance of the Ancient Ancestor Palace. Stop. Lord Wen Feng, please show your title plate. The guard of the Ancient Ancestor Palace shouted coldly. Qin Yu looked to Wen Feng. Wen Feng explained, the Ancient Ancestor Palace and the Inheritance Palace are both important places of the Gold Punishment sect. The number of people in the entire Gold Punishment sect that possess the qualifications to enter them does not exceed 10. As for you, the new consecrated, you naturally possess the qualifications to enter them. Qin Yu immediately displayed his consecrated title plate. After the guard saw the title plate, he immediately bowed respectfully. Lord Consecrated, please enter. Qin Yu and Wen Feng stepped over the doorway and entered the enormous Ancient Ancestor Palace. The Ancient Ancestor Palace was separated into a front hall and a rear hall. A large number of plaques were hung in the front hall. Qin Yu was unable to refrain himself from looking over. The 3rd Gold Punishment Lord's original name was Tong Tian. He was born on the Cypress Lotus Star. He spent 72 years to reach the level of a 1-star king. After that, he left the Cypress Lotus Star and began to wander the interstellar space. The 8th Gold Punishment Lord's original name was Hong. Place of birth is unknown. Time of cultivation is unknown. He killed the 16-star Emperor-level expert, the King of Massacre, Flourishing Blood. On each and every plaque was the biography of a Gold Punishment Lord. There were a lot of plaques hanging in the front hall. With a glance, Qin Yu saw that there were a lot of plaques hanging in the front hall. There were definitely no less than 10,000 plaques hanging there. The plaques hanging in front were the early Gold Punishment Lords. When Qin Yu and Wen Feng walked to the back hall, they saw even more plaques. Wen Feng, how many Gold Punishment Lords are there in total? Qin Yu looked to Wen Feng. Wen Feng smiled and said, could it be that your soul's power is unable to distinguish them? Qin Yu shook his head and smiled. It is not that I am unable to count them. Rather, it is precisely because I am able to count them that I do not dare to believe it. There are a total of 70,000 plaques here. In other words, from the ancient era until now, there have been over 70,000 Gold Punishment Lords. That's right. The current His Majesty Xing Yuan is indeed over 70,000 Gold Punishment Lords. When Feng nodded, Qin Yu continued to ask. However, how long would each Gold Punishment Lord hold the position for? When Feng smiled and shook his head. That is very hard to say. Some gold punishment lords held the position when they were only 15-star emperors. They might hold the position for several million years, or even several tens of millions of years before ascending. Some, for example, the current His Majesty is already an 18-star emperor. Even if he were to hold the position of gold punishment lord, he would likely ascend within several tens of thousands of years. It might even be earlier than that. Qin Yu nodded his head. It was very hard to say how long each gold punishment lord had held the position. Some were long, some were even tens of millions of years. Some were short, some were even less than 10,000 years. However, for over 70,000 gold punishment lords, even if they were to hold the position for an average of 1,000,000 years, they would still have a history of over 70 billion years. Furthermore, Qin Yu estimated that the average time they held the position should be more than 1,000,000 years. Wen Feng, exactly how long is the history of our dark star realm? Qin Yu asked. Wen Feng muttered to himself and shook his head. I'm afraid no one knows. As far as I know, the history of the dark star realm is separated into two stages. The first stage is the period when there were no inherited treasures. At that time, the dark star realm was incomparably chaotic. It was only later on when the three inherited treasures appeared that the dark star realm entered the stage of peaceful development. Qin Yu was astonished. Heavens! The time that these 70,000 gold punishment lords represented was only the time after the three inherited treasures appeared. As for the chaotic period before, who knew how long it was? The history of the dark star realm was truly long. Wen Feng sighed and said, the people of our dark star realm were warlike. Without sufficient strength, who would submit to them? Later on, the three inherited treasures appeared. Only then did all the people of the dark star realm submit to the person who possessed the inherited treasures. Qin Yu turned his gaze to the back. After passing through the front hall, one would arrive at the rear hall. The rear hall was much larger than the front hall. There were many statues in the rear hall. Those are the statues of every generation's gold punishment lord. Do you want to go and pay your respects? Wen Feng said with a smile. Forget about it. They're not real people. What's there to pay respects to? As Qin Yu said that, he turned around. Wen Feng, let's go to the inherited palace. Oh, that's right. What is that inherited palace? As Wen Feng and Qin Yu walked, they chatted with one another. The inherited palace is the place where every generation's gold punishment lord fuses with their inherited treasures. For example, after the previous gold punishment lord ascended to the divine realm, the inherited treasure had been placed in the inherited palace the entire time. It was only later when His Majesty Xing Yuan appeared that the inherited treasure fused with it. The person in charge of the inherited palace is the guard elder. Wen Feng explained in detail. After Wen Feng finished explaining, the two of them arrived outside the inherited palace. The inherited palace was very simple and unadorned. It was completely black in color and emitted an ancient aura. Merely by standing outside the inherited palace, one would feel a sense of oppression. Lu Xing, Wen Feng, come in. A voice sounded from within the inherited palace. Qin Yu looked over. A dark and thin old man was sitting cross-legged at the corner of the inherited palace. It was the guard elder. At this moment, the guard elder had already stood up and walked toward the two of them. What are the drawings on the walls? Qin Yu looked at the walls of the inherited palace with a puzzled expression. There were carvings and pictures on the walls. Qin Yu swept his gaze over the walls and discovered that there were over 10,000 carvings and pictures on the walls of the inherited palace. On the walls are scenes of battles between the people of our dark star realm before we obtained our inherited treasures. The guard elder's voice sounded. Qin Yu suddenly looked at one of the pictures. That picture was actually an interstellar map of the entire immortal, devil and demon realm. Merely, this interstellar map had a lot of markings on it. It was as if the entire immortal, devil and demon realm was occupied by the people of the dark star realm. What's going on here? What about the people of the immortal, devil and demon realms? Qin Yu asked curiously. The guard elder sighed. After countless years, even the majority of the disciples of our dark star realm have forgotten. This immortal, devil and demon realm was originally called the dark star realm. Hearing this, Qin Yu was shocked. What? The entire immortal devil and demon realm was originally called the Dark Star Realm? The guard elder narrowed his eyes and slowly said, "The people of our Dark Star Realm are the original inhabitants of this cosmic space. As for the immortals, the people of the devil and demon realms are merely people that ascended from the lower realms. Merely, there are too many of them that ascended. Furthermore, their reproductive abilities are too strong, far surpassing our Dark Star Realms people." Chapter 456. This was the first time that Qin Yu came to know that the original masters of the immortal, devil and demon realm were actually people from the Dark Star Realm. The people from the immortal devil and demon realms had all ascended from the lower realms and ended up in the immortal, devil and demon realms. Even the name immortal devil and demon realm was likely given to them by later generations. Ascending from the lower realms to the higher realms is something that cannot be changed by the heavenly law of the universe. Thus, at that time, the three great sovereigns of our Dark Star Realm decided to withdraw and live in a place. After all, the number of people in our Dark Star Realm was very small to begin with. There was no use for us to occupy that much territory, said the guard elder slowly. Qin Yu sighed in his heart. If the people from the Dark Star Realm had truly wanted to massacre those people who had ascended, then with the strength that the seniors of the immortal devil and demon realms possessed at that time, they would not have been able to resist at all. It was likely that the number of casualties would be much greater. Those people had ascended from the lower realms. The cosmic space's restriction on them was much greater. For them to reach the emperor level, it would be much more difficult than for us to reach the emperor level. Thus, even though their population was hundreds of millions of times greater than ours, the number of emperor-level experts they had was much lesser than ours, said the guard elder with a trace of confidence. Wenfeng nodded and said, "If we were to truly fight, we would only need to use gravity restriction, and then engage in close combat. Humph, we, the people from the Dark Star Realm, would definitely be able to kill those people." Qin Yu was able to sense that the people from the Dark Star Realm were extremely arrogant. However, Qin Yu knew, although there were more emperor-level experts in the Dark Star Realm, there were still extremely powerful people in the immortal devil and demon realms. Compared to the Dark Star Realm, there was not much of a difference. Other than the carvings on the four walls of the palace, there was also an enormous altar, over 100 meters wide in the middle of the palace. This is the sacred altar. Before the Gold Punishment Lord was born, the inherited treasure would be in the sacred altar, said the guard elder calmly. Qin Yu asked in confusion, "Is the guard elder not afraid that some people with ulterior motives would come and seize the inherited treasure?" Wenfeng laughed out loud. "Lu Xing, you don't know about this. This sacred altar contains the power of the inherited treasure. Trying to forcibly seize it, it's simply impossible." Qin Yu's divine sense spread out, covering the entire holy altar. As expected, this sacred altar contained an extremely strange power. The feeling it gave Qin Yu was very similar to the feeling the seal at the entrance of the Bewitching God Temple gave Qin Yu. It was already like this when there was no inheritance treasure in the holy altar. The defense of the holy altar was probably even stronger. No wonder it was impossible to forcefully seize it. "Guardian Elder, I've learned a lot today." Qin Yu smiled and nodded. "Then I won't disturb you any longer. I'll take my leave first." Seeing that Qin Yu was suddenly leaving, Wenfeng was a little puzzled. However, he still bid farewell to the Guardian Elder. The Guardian Elder nodded. On the other hand, Qin Yu and Wenfeng left the Hall of Inheritance, Wenfeng's private palace. As one of the 8 great heads of the Gold Punishment sect, Qin Yu, the newly appointed consecrator, was naturally one of them. Wenfeng's private palace occupied an extremely vast area. There were also many servants here. For the time being, Qin Yu was staying here. "Lu Xing, what exactly are you planning to do in the Bewitching God Temple? Can you tell me about it?" asked Wenfeng. Qin Yu knew that Wenfeng was going to ask. Thus, he already had an excuse in his heart. He smiled and said, "Wenfeng, do you know my true strength?" "I'm not sure. You should be a 15-star emperor," said Wenfeng with uncertainty. Wenfeng's soul realm was far inferior to Qin Yu's. He was simply unable to see through Qin Yu's cultivation. Thus he was naturally unable to determine. 15-star Emperor level? Qin Yu lightly smiled and shook his head. Wenfeng's eyes suddenly shined. It would appear that this Lu Xing was indeed someone who had concealed his strength deeply. Wenfeng was a bit astonished. However, he was also puzzled. Exactly how strong was this Lu Xing before him? My strength is 17-star Emperor level, Qin Yu said to Wenfeng with a smile on his face. 17-star Emperor level? Even though Wenfeng was prepared, he was still shocked. Qin Yu continued. The reason why I am going to the Bewitching God Temple this time around is precisely for the treasures in the Bewitching God Temple. That is because my current strength is on par with that Vice Sect Master Lulan. It will be somewhat difficult for me to defeat him and become the new overlord. Haha, Lu Xing, as I expected. Wenfeng started laughing. Lu Xing, I've already heard that His Majesty is going to undergo the divine tribulation soon. I had originally thought that, once His Majesty undergoes the divine tribulation, with Lulan's strength, he would have absolute certainty in succeeding the position of overlord. But now it would appear that it is still very hard to say. I reckon that Lulan still doesn't know that your strength has already reached 17-star Emperor level. Qin Yu nodded his head. Qin Yu could only explain it to others in such a manner. His Majesty is going to undergo the divine tribulation soon? Qin Yu was shocked. He did not know about this. Wenfeng nodded his head and said with a smile, That's right. You've just arrived at the sacred mountain. How would you know about this sort of secret? Furthermore, His Majesty's divine tribulation has never been announced with great fanfare. During this period of time, that Lulan has already prepared himself to succeed the position of overlord after His Majesty Xing Yuan ascends. Qin Yu's heart moved. It would be pretty good for him to fight for the position of Gold Punishment Lord. At the very least, he would be able to experience the might of the Dark Star Realm's inherited treasure. If Lulan wants to succeed the position of overlord, he will have to at least pass through me. Qin Yu had a trace of confidence on his face. Good. Lu Xing, I support you. Wenfeng patted Qin Yu's shoulder. Then he sighed and said, Back then, when I reached 15-star Emperor level, I wanted to become the overlord. Unfortunately, His Majesty Xing Yuan appeared. Later on, Lulan also appeared. His Majesty Xing Yuan is broad-minded. It is one thing for him to become the overlord. However, someone like Lulan is vicious and arrogant. I dislike him the most. A trace of hatred appeared in Wenfeng's eyes. After knowing that His Majesty Xing Yuan was going to undergo the divine tribulation, that Lulan became even more arrogant. From Lulan's point of view, with his strength of 17-star Emperor level, succeeding the position of Gold Punishment Lord was an extremely easy task. Lu Xing, you must definitely teach that Lulan a lesson. Wenfeng instructed, Rest assured. However, before that, I will first make a trip to the Bewitching God Temple. If I can obtain a good weapon, I will have more certainty in defeating him. Qin Yu said with a smile. Suddenly, a person walked in from outside Wenfeng's private palace. It was Vice Sect Master Kofeng. Vice Sect Master Kofeng still had an amiable smile on his face. He said, Lu Xing, His Majesty the Black Flame Lord has arrived. His Majesty the Black Flame Lord has arrived? Qin Yu was overjoyed. Wenfeng also said, Lu Xing, speak properly, and have His Majesty the Black Flame Lord help you. Vice Sect Master Kofeng said with a beaming smile. The three great sacred planets in the three star fields are all core planets. Furthermore, they are directly connected by interstellar conveying arrays. After the Black Flame Lord received His Majesty's message, he immediately rushed over. It is said that His Majesty the White Profound Lord has also set off. He will likely arrive soon. Qin Yu was overjoyed. He did not expect that the Black Flame Lord and the White Profound Lord would arrive so quickly. Vice Sect Master Kofeng, quickly bring me there. Qin Yu's face was filled with joy. His Majesty the Black Flame Lord is in the main hall of the sect. He is currently chatting with His Majesty Xing Yuan. As Kofeng spoke, he flew side by side with Qin Yu and Wenfeng toward the mountain where the main hall was located. Inside the conference hall. Haha, Xing Yuan, this is what I admire the most about you. Straightforward. Haha. Qin Yu, Wenfeng were still outside when they heard a hearty laughter. Vice Sect Master Kofeng said in a low voice. The person who spoke is His Majesty the Black Flame Lord. Lu Xing. His Majesty the Black Flame Lord is a very straightforward person. You must not beat around the bush and speak with overtones. That is what His Majesty the Black Flame Lord hates the most. I got it. Qin Yu thanked Vice Sect Master Kofeng for his warning. When interacting with others, it was very important to know their temperament. Qin Yu, Wenfeng and Kofeng walked side by side to the entrance of the main hall. After that, they directly walked into the main hall. Qin Yu's gaze immediately locked onto the most robust man in the main hall. That resolute face, bulging muscles and that fiery red hair. This was one of the 3 great sovereigns of the Dark Star Realm, the Black Flame Lord. 17-star Emperor level strength. Merely, there's a mysterious aura on his body. It should be because of that inherited treasure. Qin Yu made this judgment in his heart. Lu Xing pays his respects to His Majesty the Black Flame Lord. Qin Yu slightly bowed and said with a smile. The Black Flame Lord took a glance at Qin Yu. Then he looked to the Gold Punishment Lord Xing Yuan in shock. Xing Yuan, this consecrated of your Gold Punishment sect is truly extraordinary. Even I am unable to detect his soul's level. It's not only you. I am also unable to detect his soul's level. Xing Yuan said with a smile. Is he really that extraordinary? A clear and cold voice sounded from behind Qin Yu. Qin Yu turned around to look, and saw a handsome man walking over with a maid. Jumi, if you don't believe me, you can check it yourself. The Black Flame Lord joked. At this moment, Qin Yu noticed the strength of the person who had arrived. This man by the name of Jumi also possessed the strength of a 17-star emperor. As for the maid behind him, she possessed the strength of a 15-star emperor. Qin Yu knew this woman. She was the Han Shui that he had met on the 15-star Emperor Dark Star. Lu Xing. Han Shui looked to Qin Yu in shock. Little Shui, you know him? Jumi turned around to look at Han Shui. Han Shui nodded and said, Master, this Lu Xing is the person that I had mentioned to Master before. He is the person who had cultivated on the 15-star Emperor Dark Star for 3,000 years. 15-star Emperor level? With such a soul cultivation, I'm afraid he's not just a 15-star Emperor. Jumi said with a light smile. The Gold Punishment Lord Xing Yuan said to Qin Yu. Lu Xing, this is the White Profound Lord. Sure enough, it was as I had expected. Qin Yu was already prepared. He immediately bowed and said, Lu Xing pays his respects to His Majesty the White Profound Lord. You're Lu Xing, right? I've heard that Xing Yuan had invited me and Wu Shan here for your matter. The White Profound Lord's expression was as cold as before. It was as if his mood did not fluctuate at all. Qin Yu nodded and said, That's right. I wish to enter the Bewitching God Temple. However, it is still not the time for everyone to enter. Thus, I wish to ask your majesties to help me refine a passage title plate. This matter is a bit troublesome. The Black Flame Lord Wu Shan raised his thick black eyebrows. Then he smiled. Lu Xing, there's nothing good in the Bewitching God Temple. It's fine if you don't enter. Qin Yu merely shook his head. Your Majesty the Black Flame Lord, please help me. At this moment, the Black Flame Lord Wu Shan turned his gaze to the White Profound Lord. As for the White Profound Lord, he remained seated and indifferently shook his head. Thus he did not say anything. In an instant, the atmosphere in the hall became somewhat stifling. Wu Shan, Jumi, Lu Xing's soul cultivation is extremely high. I reckon that his ascension speed will also be very fast. Isn't it just letting him enter the Bewitching God Temple once? It's nothing much, just help me out. Furthermore, the 3 of us can refine a passage title plate in the blink of an eye. Speaking of which, as the Gold Punishment Lord, I have yet to refine a passage title plate. Furthermore, I will soon ascend. If I don't refine a passage title plate this time around, I reckon that I won't have another chance. Joked Xing Yuan. What Xing Yuan said was the truth. He had only been the Gold Punishment Lord for several thousand years. As for the Dark Star Realm, One would enter the bewitching god temple once every 100,000 years. Only after 100,000 years would the three sovereigns work together to refine a passage title plate. Xingyuan would soon ascend. Thus, it was truly possible that he would not have the opportunity to refine a passage title plate. Jumi, since Xingyuan has said this, please help him out a bit. Wu Shan muttered to himself for a moment, and then said to Jumi. Jumi calmly shook his head. He continued to say, there is no need for this Lu Xing to enter the bewitching god temple. Why must he break the rules? At the very least, there should be a reason to break the rules. Lu Xing, if you are able to give me a reason that can convince me, I am able to agree. Reason? Qin Yu took a look at the main hall. There were many people in the main hall. That Vice Sect Master Lu Lan was also present. Your Majesty's White Profound Lord, Black Flame Lord, could you come with me to the side hall? Qin Yu said with a smile. Once those words were said, the Gold Punishment Lord Xingyuan, Vice Sect Master Lu Lan, and the others were all surprised. As for Wen Feng, he had a smile on his face. He thought that Qin Yu wanted to talk about the matter of fighting over the position of the Gold Punishment Lord. At this moment, Lu Lan was present. As such, it was unsuitable for Qin Yu to say too much in the main hall. The Black Flame Lord and the White Profound Lord glanced at each other. Very well, I shall see what sort of reason you have to convince me. The White Profound Lord nodded and said. After that, Qin Yu, the Black Flame Lord, and the White Profound Lord walked into the side hall. Once they entered the side hall, the White Profound Lord waved his hand and set up a restriction. Then he looked to Qin Yu. Lu Xing, I have already set up a restriction in this side hall. Go ahead and speak. The Black Flame Lord also looked to Qin Yu. Your Majesty's Black Flame Lord, White Profound Lord, your guesses are correct. My soul's level is very high. My cultivation is also not only 15-star Emperor level. Instead, it is 17-star Emperor level. Qin Yu said. The Black Flame Lord and the White Profound Lord nodded. There was not the slightest trace of surprise on their faces. The two of you should know that His Majesty Xingyuan will soon undergo the divine tribulation and ascend. At that time, Lu Lan and I will have to fight over the position of the Gold Punishment Lord. Right now, I do not possess sufficient certainty in being able to defeat him. However, my soul's level is very high. I believe that I should be able to obtain a decent harvest from the Bewitching God Temple. I hope that the two of you can help me. Qin Yu finished speaking in a single breath. The Black Flame Lord laughed and said, so that's the case. That could be considered a reason. Jumi, what do you think? The White Profound Lord shook his head indifferently and said, fight over the position of the Gold Punishment Lord? Whoever becomes the Gold Punishment Lord will not affect us in the slightest. It will also not affect the Dark Star Realm. Thus, why should I help you? Qin Yu was stunned. Qin Yu frowned and took a deep breath. Then he stared at the White Profound Lord and said, Your Majesty White Profound Lord, in that case, could you give it face and help me this once? A ring suddenly appeared on Qin Yu's finger. The Blazing Profound Ring. Chapter 457. White Profound Lord Jumi's originally indifferent expression disappeared. His eyes emitted a shocking cold light as he stared at the blazing profound ring on Qin Yu's finger. Black Flame Lord Wu Shan's expression also became serious. Lu Xing, where did you get this blazing profound ring? White Profound Lord Jumi stared at Qin Yu with an incomparably serious expression. Qin Yu took a glance at the White Profound Lord and the Black Flame Lord. He nodded and said, This blazing profound ring is something that I obtained from the Immortal Realm's Immortal Emperor in Aiyang. It can be considered as a gift from him. He gave it to you. It's impossible for him to give it to you. White Profound Lord said coldly. And Aiyang should know the use of this blazing profound ring. He would definitely not give it to an outsider. But he's dead. Qin Yu continued. If he didn't die, he might not give it to an outsider. However, he's about to die. Why would a person who's about to die care about a mere worldly possession? Qin Yu smiled faintly and said, Your Majesty's Black Flame Lord and White Profound Lord, the two of you might not know. I've once roamed the Immortal Realm and the Demon Realm. This blazing profound ring was obtained by my good luck. I know. Your Majesties have a relationship with Immortal Emperor Inai Yang. I hope that your Majesties can give face to the blazing profound ring, and help me this once. Black Flame Lord sighed and said, Can you tell me how he died? Before Inai Yang died, he sent us a message saying that he would definitely die. However, no matter how Jumi and I asked him, he wouldn't tell us the reason for his death. White Profound Lord looked at Qin Yu as well. Qin Yu understood in his heart. Immortal Emperor Inai Yang, who was poisoned by the God Realm's poisonous bug, was probably too embarrassed to tell his good friends. Until his death, Immortal Emperor Inai Yang probably couldn't help but to leave this secret behind and tell it to him, a successor. Your Majesty's Black Flame Lord and White Profound Lord. To be honest, Immortal Emperor Inai Yang's death was a little cowardly. Before he died, he didn't wish to spread the reason for his death. Please forgive me. Qin Yu still didn't say it out. The Black Flame Lord and the White Profound Lord exchanged glances and sighed. What a useless death. I really don't know how Inai Yang died. What a useless death. The Black Flame Lord let out a long sigh and looked at Qin Yu. Lu Xing, since you have the blazing ice ring, of course we can agree to your request. The White Profound Lord also nodded. Qin Yu felt relieved. Sure enough, he made the right bet. Qin Yu had no other choice. Otherwise, why would he take out this blazing profound ring? After taking out the blazing profound ring, Qin Yu was still worried that the Black Flame Lord and the White Profound Lord would misunderstand that he was the person who killed Inai Yang. He had even prepared a bunch of excuses. Luckily, before Immortal Emperor Inai Yang died, he had contacted the Black Flame Lord and the White Profound Lord. Thank you, Your Majesties. Qin Yu expressed his gratitude. The White Profound Lord said indifferently, There's no need. If you want to thank someone, then thank Inai Yang. Unfortunately, Inai Yang has died. Alas! Qin Yu and the other two were chatting in the side hall. The people in the main hall were also chatting. The topic of their conversation was whether or not Qin Yu would be able to convince the Black Flame Lord and the White Profound Lord. You all should know about His Majesty the White Profound Lord's temperament. He is not that easy to convince. Vice Sect Master Bao Yu said with a smile. As for Vice Sect Master Lu Lan, his eyes were closed. He had a cold and detached appearance. From the way I see it, that Lu Xing is looking forward to entering the Bewitching God Temple. He should have prepared a method to convince Jumi and Wu Shan. Although, I am unable to imagine how he would be able to convince them, said the Gold Punishment Lord Xing Yuan with a smile. When Feng, who was below, was muttering in his heart, would Qin Yu's reasoning be able to convince the White Profound Lord? They've come out, said the Gold Punishment Lord Xing Yuan with a smile. At the same time, he looked toward the side hall's entrance. When Feng, Lu Lan and the others also looked over, they saw Qin Yu and the other two walking out from the side hall's entrance one after another. Seeing Qin Yu's appearance, everyone had an idea of what had happened. Consecrator Lu Xing's mood seems to be pretty good. Likely, he has successfully convinced Wu Shan and the others, said Xing Yuan with a smile. Right when Qin Yu was about to say something, the Black Flame Lord Wu Shan opened his mouth and laughed loudly. Lu Xing has truly given us a pleasant surprise. Amen. Let's help him refine a passage title plate. The White Profound Lord also nodded. We're going to refine it here, asked the Gold Punishment Lord Xing Yuan. The Black Flame Lord and the White Profound Lord both nodded. They had no objections. Qin Yu was surprised. Could it be that this passage title plate could be refined anywhere without any preparation? As for Wen Feng, who stood to the side, he saw Qin Yu's confused expression and said via voice transmission, Lu Xing, to us, refining this passage title plate is incomparably difficult. However, to the three majesties, it is something that can be accomplished in the blink of an eye. Good. This is the first time that I am going to refine a passage title plate. Thus, the appearance of the passage title plate will be decided by me. The Gold Punishment Lord flipped his hand and took out a pitch-black metal. A burst of gold force surged out of his palm and enveloped that pitch-black metal. Under the powerful control of the gold force, the appearance of that metal began to change. In merely a blink of an eye, that pitch-black metal turned into a hexagonal passage title plate. On the front side was the word order. On the back side was a vivid and lifelike sculpture. It was precisely the gold punishment Lord Xing Yuan himself. Xing Yuan, you are truly narcissistic. Seeing this scene, the Black Flame Lord Wu Shan burst into laughter. Everyone in the main hall also burst into laughter. Xing Yuan said in a deadly earnest manner, "This is likely the only time that I am going to refine a passage title plate. Thus, I must be a bit more serious. Well then, the appearance has been decided. Wu Shan Jumi, let's refine it a bit." The White Profound Lord and the Black Flame Lord nodded. The three sovereigns' expressions all turned solemn. Soon after, they extended their right palms at the same time. A ray of light shot out from the palms of the three sovereigns. One was golden, one was white, and one was black. The three rays of light gathered on the passage title plate. Qin Yu's eyes narrowed. The power of an inherited treasure. Qin Yu was able to clearly sense the mysterious power contained within the three rays of light. This sort of aura was exactly the same as the aura of the seal that Qin Yu had sensed at the entrance of the Bewitching God Temple. In an instant, the three sovereigns retrieved their right hands. At this moment, light was faintly circulating on the surface of the passage title plate. After a short period of refinement, this passage title plate was no longer made of ordinary metal. The gold punishment Lord Xing Yuan held the passage title plate in his hand and looked at his own sculpture on the other side. After admiring it for a moment, he threw the passage title plate to Qin Yu. "Lu Xing, take it." Qin Yu immediately caught the passage title plate. "It's very simple to use this passage title plate. You only need to bring this passage title plate to the entrance of the Bewitching God Temple. You only need to insert your gold force into the passage title plate, and the passage title plate will naturally release a ray of energy into the seal of the Bewitching God Temple. At that time, the seal will disappear for a period of time. You can take advantage of that time to enter. When exiting, there is another method. That is to insert your gold force into the passage title plate to guide the energy within." The gold punishment Lord Xing Yuan carefully explained. The Black Flame Lord Wu Shan said with a chuckle, "Lu Xing, do not recklessly insert your gold force into the passage title plate. This passage title plate does not contain a lot of energy. I reckon that it can only be used 3 or 4 times. If you were to use up all the energy within the passage title plate, you would not be able to open the seal of the Bewitching God Temple." "I understand." Qin Yu held the passage title plate in his hand. His mood was extremely good. He was able to clearly sense the energy within the passage title plate. The aura of the energy was exactly the same as the aura of the seal. Merely, the amount of energy within the passage title plate was not a lot. He reckoned that it would be used up after a couple of times. "Lu Xing, this time around, the Black Flame Lord and the White Profound Lord have specially rushed over to help. I have already ordered people to prepare a banquet. You must properly entertain the two of them." The gold punishment Lord Xing Yuan instructed. Qin Yu nodded. "Of course." After obtaining the passage title plate, Qin Yu passionately entertained the Black Flame Lord and the White Profound Lord. Only on the second day did Qin Yu step onto the road to the Bewitching God Temple by himself. After comprehending for 3,000 years, Qin Yu's soul Jin Dan was even inferior to that of ordinary deities. Adding on the assistance of Lu Xing's tears, Qin Yu was able to cross an entire star field with a single greater teleportation. With the speed of Qin Yu's greater teleportation, in a short period of time, Qin Yu arrived at the star system closest to the Bewitching God Temple. In this star system, Qin Yu did not dare to use greater teleportation. Instead, he used the interstellar conveying array to arrive at the Dragon Arrow Star. On the Dragon Arrow Star, "Lord, it's you again?" The person in charge of the interstellar conveying array was shocked. Not long ago, Qin Yu had come here once. "That's right, it's me again," Qin Yu said with a beaming smile. His current mood was extremely good. Qin Yu then turned into a ray of light and shot into the outer space. Qin Yu began his journey with extreme speed. No matter how fast he flew, it was still far inferior to greater teleportation. Although the distance was less than half a star system, Qin Yu flew for a very long time. At the entrance of the Bewitching God Temple, Elder Lian Fan was still sitting cross-legged at the entrance. Monitoring the entrance of the Bewitching God Temple could be considered a boring job. However, as Elder Lian Fan was quietly cultivating, time passed by very quickly. A few days ago, the scene of that expert called Lu Xing attacking the seal was something that Elder Lian Fan would occasionally recall. However, he sighed in his heart. Lord Lu Xing is truly amazing. Lian Fan. A familiar voice sounded. Elder Lian Fan suddenly opened his eyes. Upon seeing the person who had arrived, he immediately greeted respectfully. Lian Fan greets Lord Lu Xing. I wonder what business Lord Lu Xing has with us. Could it be that Lord wants to break this seal again? Qin Yu flipped his hand and took out the passage tile. This time, I have brought the passage tile. Seeing the passage tile, Elder Lian Fan couldn't help but sigh in his heart. As expected of a super expert, he was actually able to make the three sovereigns make an exception and refine a passage tile just for him. Congratulations to Lord Lu Xing for obtaining this passage tile. Lian Fan immediately said, Step aside. Qin Yu said with a light smile. Yes. Lian Fan stepped aside and then looked at Qin Yu, watching someone enter the Bewitching God Temple. This was also an extremely rare scene. The passage tile in Qin Yu's hand floated in front of Qin Yu. Qin Yu pointed with one hand. An array of gold power entered the passage tile. Immediately, the passage tile began to vibrate. A three-colored ray of light shot out from the passage tile and shot toward the seal at the entrance of the Bewitching God Temple. The seal that only vibrated when Qin Yu attacked it with his full strength was attacked by this three-colored ray of light. Like a curtain being pulled open, the energy of the seal was pulled open to both sides and revealed a passage. Qin Yu retrieved the passage tile, and his body turned into a ray of light and passed through the passage in an instant. After a short period of time, the seal slowly closed. The black sand was close to 10 meters thick. After passing through the passage, Qin Yu saw the outer region of the Bewitching God Temple. With a single glance, it was a vast expanse of fog. The entire outer region of the Bewitching God Temple seemed to be covered by fog. When Qin Yu flew forward a few steps, he discovered that within the fog, there would occasionally be landslides and earth splitting, and occasionally, there would be volcanic eruptions. It seems that this is the illusory realm of the outer region of the Bewitching God Temple. Qin Yu knew a lot about the Bewitching God Temple. The outer region of the Bewitching God Temple was a divine restriction. To be exact, it was a type of illusory restriction that belonged to the divine realm. The area covered by this restriction was extremely vast. Its volume was comparable to that of 100 ordinary stars. This also caused the power of the illusory restriction to not be very strong. Most importantly, this illusory restriction did not possess the power to kill. It only had the ability to trap people. However, being trapped in this illusory restriction for hundreds of millions of years was also very painful. Ordinary people would only enter a part of the outer region of the illusory realm. Because the area covered by this restriction was too large, its power was not very strong. As long as one did not enter the depths and stayed in the outer region, it was still possible to come out of the regions that one's soul power could penetrate. Let me see how far I can penetrate with the realm of my soul power. Qin Yu's consciousness immediately began to penetrate into the illusory realm. Qin Yu could clearly sense that when his consciousness entered the illusory realm, it was as if it had sunk into a quagmire. It was extremely difficult to advance. After a while, this is my limit. However, it is not even a millionth of the area covered by the illusory restriction. Qin Yu could clearly sense that in the deeper region that his consciousness had covered, there were actually 3 divine artifacts floating in the air. Qin Yu flipped his hand and took out the Bewitching God painting. Misty starlight flickered around the Bewitching God painting. Qin Yu muttered to himself, "Illusory restriction? I don't have time to waste." A portion of Qin Yu's consciousness entered the Bewitching God painting. Naturally, the route to the inner palace of the Bewitching God Temple appeared in his mind. However, this route was constantly changing. Qin Yu took a step forward and instantly entered the misty illusory realm. With the bewitching god painting pointing out the path, Qin Yu constantly turned left and right. He even took a roundabout route. However, Qin Yu knew that this was the shortest route. 6 hours later, Qin Yu had advanced half of the journey. During this half of the journey, Qin Yu had only casually picked up 36 divine artifacts. As for the divine artifacts that could be obtained by taking a longer detour, Qin Yu was too lazy to pick them up, because Qin Yu knew that if he wanted to obtain them, it would be incomparably easy. Back then, when Yang first entered the Bewitching God Temple, using the Bewitching God painting, he actually only obtained a dozen or so divine artifacts. The realm of his soul was too weak. Qin Yu sighed in his heart. As for Qin Yu, he was still rapidly proceeding forward. His divine awareness had covered a vast region. When Yang first entered the Bewitching God Temple, the area covered by his soul power was not even a millionth of Qin Yu's. How could he compare to Qin Yu? Chapter 458. Leave some more divine artifacts for those people who come later. Qin Yu thought in his heart, if he were to continue to plunder here and take away all of the divine artifacts, then there would be no more divine artifacts for the people in the future. Qin Yu immediately increased his speed. His body turned into a blur. The remaining journey was even more winding. After spending 8 hours, Qin Yu finally completely passed through the area covered by the illusion barrier. As for Qin Yu, there were a total of 46 divine artifacts in his Jianglan's realm. Previously, there were several divine artifacts that were within Qin Yu's sight. However, Qin Yu did not go and take any of them. Qin Yu also did not want to take too many. To the outer region of the Bewitching God Temple, 46 divine artifacts were not much. After passing through the misty illusion barrier region, the scene before him suddenly became clear. About 10 miles away from Qin Yu, there was a purple-colored building floating in the air. This purple-colored building was mainly composed of 4 palaces. The 4 palaces were respectively located in the north, south, east, and west. They were all connected by walls. It was like a courtyard house. The 4 connected palaces were floating in the space. This is the main body of the Bewitching God Temple. Never had I expected that the Bewitching God Temple was formed by 4 palaces connected together. Qin Yu's divine awareness immediately covered the 4 palaces of the Bewitching God Temple. The Bewitching God Temple was not large. The length of the 4 palaces was only several hundred meters. The entire Bewitching God Temple was much smaller than the Qin Yu Immortal Mansion. However, Qin Yu knew that this Bewitching God Temple was extremely extraordinary. That was because his divine awareness was only able to reach the outer region of the Bewitching God Temple, and was unable to penetrate into the interior of the Bewitching God Temple. There's only a single entrance. I reckon that immortal Emperor Yang had lost his life after accidentally stepping on that divine realm's poisonous bug after entering the Bewitching God Temple. Qin Yu flew toward the entrance. The courtyard house-shaped Bewitching God Temple only had a single entrance. When Qin Yu flew to the entrance, Qin Yu had already started to be on guard. Immortal Emperor Yang's death had already warned him. Thus, how could Qin Yu possibly dare to relax? What a luxurious door. I reckon that even a high-quality divine artifact wouldn't be able to leave a single mark on it. Qin Yu looked at the main entrance of the Bewitching God Temple, a deep blue door with a surface similar to granite. The door was wide open at this moment. Qin Yu looked at his feet carefully, and then stepped in. Inside the Bewitching God Temple, for some unknown reason, Qin Yu's divine sense was being suppressed. He could barely cover an area of a few meters around him with his divine sense. What Qin Yu didn't know was that Immortal Emperor Yang had entered this place before. It was just that at that time, Immortal Emperor Yang's immortal sense couldn't leave his body at all. Before entering, Qin Yu's spiritual consciousness and eyes had carefully observed the surroundings. However, divine sense and eyes could deceive people. When Qin Yu took a step inside, he discovered that the stars had changed and everything had changed. This is still the Bewitching God Temple that I was observing earlier. Qin Yu looked at everything in front of him in shock. The Bewitching God Temple was divided into 4 palaces. According to Qin Yu's observation from the outside, The 4 palaces were only about 10 meters tall. However, after stepping in, Qingyu discovered that the top of this palace was actually over 100 meters tall. Qingyu glanced at his surroundings. Heavens, exactly how big is this bewitching god temple? When I observed it from the outside, it was only several hundred meters long. However, now that I see it, I am actually unable to see the end of it. Qingyu was a bit shocked. Faced with something that was hard to explain, Qingyu did not dare to act blindly without thinking. Mind voice transmission. Wu Lan, I have already entered the interior of the bewitching god temple. Qingyu directly sent a voice transmission to Wu Lan in the Jianglan's realm. Wu Lan's understanding of the bewitching god temple was not something that Qingyu could compare with. Wu Lan stopped his training. You've already entered the interior of the bewitching god temple? Good. Is it the front palace? Wu Lan asked. Front palace? I do not know the names of the 4 palaces of the bewitching god temple. However, I have only just entered the bewitching god temple. Merely, upon entering, I discovered that the interior of the bewitching god temple seemed to be much larger than what I observed from the outside. Thus, I did not dare to act blindly without thinking. Qingyu said via voice transmission. Wu Lan immediately smiled and said via voice transmission. The 4 palaces of the bewitching god temple are respectively the Front Palace, Transfer Palace, Artifacts Palace and Refining Flames Palace. Wu Lan had stayed in the bewitching god temple before. Thus he knew about the bewitching god temple very well. The palace that you have entered right now is the Front Palace. When you exit the Front Palace, you will enter the central courtyard. Amen. When you arrive there, I will tell you in detail. Qingyu did not care about the other palaces anymore. He immediately asked, why is this Front Palace much larger than what I saw from the outside? Wu Lan said via mind voice transmission. The master of the bewitching god temple is an extremely extraordinary character. When I was in the divine realm, I was also only at the bottom. Although I do not know the identity and strength of the master of the bewitching god temple, I do know one thing, that the master of the bewitching god temple is very powerful. His bewitching god temple is also very peculiar. The space inside it is actually extremely large. Compared to what you see from the outside, it is over 10,000 times larger. To be able to descend to the immortal devil and demon realm from the divine realm, how could he be an ordinary person? Qingyu thought in his heart. Qingyu was able to guess that to descend to the immortal, devil and demon realm from the divine realm was definitely not something that an ordinary expert from the divine realm could do. Is there anything that I need to pay attention to while walking in the bewitching god temple? Qingyu asked. Wu Lan said via mind voice transmission. The Front Palace of the bewitching god temple does not have any restrictions. You can walk around as you wish. However, there are many rooms in the Front Palace. When you enter a room, it would be best for you to rely on the bewitching god painting. Otherwise, it would be very easy for you to get lost in a room. Get lost in a room? Qingyu was startled. At the same time, Qingyu swept his gaze over. In the center of the Front Palace was a great hall. At the same time, there were 3 winding corridors. Qingyu was unable to see the path to the courtyard. There were rooms on both sides of these winding corridors. How could he get lost in a room? Qingyu, don't be careless. Because there aren't any precious things in the great hall and corridors, there are no restrictions. However, there are some things in every room. Thus you must be careful. Wu Lan advised. Qingyu calmed down. There were things in the rooms. Qingyu couldn't help but rejoice. Qingyu first carefully observed the great hall. There were red wooden chairs in the great hall. At the same time, there were some decorations hanging on the walls. It gave off a very natural feeling. Qingyu walked to the side of the red wooden chair. He grabbed the chair with one hand and used his strength to break it down. What a hardwood! Merely this red wooden chair's hardness is comparable to that of a high-quality divine artifact. Qingyu discovered that only when he used his full strength would the chair start to tremble. Why didn't immortal Emperor Enai Yang take away these chairs? The materials of these chairs are quite powerful. Qingyu was a bit puzzled. He simply didn't know that immortal Emperor Enai Yang from back then only wanted to enter those rooms to find treasures. How could he possibly care about these seemingly ordinary chairs? Qin Yu looked at the great hall. Amen, I'll look carefully later. Let's go check out those rooms first. Qin Yu chose a winding corridor and walked along it. The outside of the palace was constructed with purple-colored stones. However, the inside of the palace was constructed with blue-colored stones. Qin Yu walked to the front of the first room. In his mind, the painting of the bewitching god appeared. Pushing open the door, Qin Yu's eyes were unable to clearly see what was inside the room. His divine sense spread out 10 meters, and was barely able to discover a path made of blue-colored stones. That's right, there was actually a blue-colored stone path in the middle of the room. He stepped into the path. The scene immediately changed. The originally foggy scene became clear. This was a very secluded courtyard. The path was paved with blue-colored stones. Within the courtyard, there were even a few stone benches. However, what attracted Qin Yu's attention the most in the courtyard were the cages. Every single cage contained a monstrous beast. These monstrous beasts were of all shapes and sizes. However, every single one of the monstrous beasts had transformed into their original forms. There were bugs, birds, beasts, and even some other monstrous beasts. In front of every cage, there was also a stone tablet erected. Pet pointed wing. Comes from the dinosaur world. Its original form is a pointed-winged dinosaur. Qin Yu looked at the cage in front of him. Within the cage, there was a bird-like creature that appeared to be only half the height of a human. However, Qin Yu was certain that he had never seen such a creature in the immortal, devil and demon realm. Qin Yu looked at other places. Pet white hair. Comes from the green creature realm. Its original form is the cosmic beast white hair. Pet 9 beasts. Comes from the illusion light realm. Its original form is the illusion devil beast. Pet 5 claws. Comes from the immortal devil and demon realm. Its original form is the 5 claws golden dragon. Stone tablets and cages were placed in picturesque disorder all over the courtyard. Within each cage, the monstrous beasts had transformed into their original forms. Qin Yu's mind went blank. Only after a long time did he react. What is this place? A pet garden? Qin Yu is somewhat dumbstruck. He never thought that there would be a courtyard in this room, and that there would be so many cages. Wulan, I've entered a pet room. What's going on? Qin Yu directly sent a voice transmission to Wulan. Only after a long time did Wulan react. Pet room? Qin Yu, the room that you've entered, didn't it have a lot of cages with monstrous beasts inside? That's right. What's going on? Qin Yu felt that his breathing was somewhat stifled. Wulan said via mind voice transmission. This is the place where Yi Chu and I used to be. Back then, Yi Chu and I were also placed here as pets by the master of the bewitching god temple. Qin Yu was speechless. However, Qin Yu was able to sense the bitterness in Wu Lan's voice. The master of the bewitching god temple was fond of raising pets. He was fond of raising exotic pets that came from different places. I remember, back then, many people from the divine realm came to the master of the bewitching god temple very respectfully. At the same time, they presented exotic pets to the master of the bewitching god temple and asked for his help. As for me, I was captured by an expert from the divine realm and then presented to the master of the bewitching god temple. Wulan sighed. Qin Yu understood in his heart. Usually, when the master of the bewitching god temple was bored, he would grab a pet cage with one hand and play with it. All of these pets were extremely rare. Many of them came from other cosmic spaces. Even in other cosmic spaces, they were still extremely rare. Wulan sighed. Qin Yu understood in his heart. That was because he saw that one of the pets was actually a super divine beast from the immortal devil and demon realm, 5-clawed golden dragon. Back then, when Immortal Emperor Yang entered this room, he had released Yi Chu and me. However, with his strength, he was unable to take away any more. Wulan sighed and said, Qin Yu, if you have a way, I hope that you'll be able to restore the freedom of these monstrous beasts. Qin Yu muttered to himself for a moment. Okay. According to the safe path indicated by the bewitching god painting, only the limestone path in the middle was safe. The other paths that approached the cages were all constantly changing. Qin carefully and unceasingly approached the cages. Absorb. With an intention, Qin directly absorbed the cages into the Jianglan's realm. Continuing like this, Qin absorbed over 80 cages in a single breath. The monstrous beasts in each of the cages all possessed decent strength. However, none of them had reached the deity level. The majority of them were at the demon emperor level. There were even some at the demon king level. Let's go break open those cages after we've finished strolling around. For the time being, Qin had only absorbed all of the cages. At the same time, he had also completely memorized the things written on the 80-plus stone tablets with his divine awareness. Soon after, Qin left this pet room. The master of the bewitching god temple knew how to enjoy life. There were pet rooms and also plant rooms. The plant room was an enormous garden. There were all kinds of rare and exotic plants in the garden. Qin was unable to help himself from falling in love with some of the rare and exotic plants. After exiting the plant room, Qin casually chose a room and entered it. This room did not have any illusions. It was still a room. However, all of the things in this room were actually things that could not be touched. Within the room, there were dragons formed from stone or people formed from wood. In short, they were all naturally formed sculptures and works of art. Qin was unable to refrain himself from exclaiming in admiration. Beside each and every piece of art were detailed annotations. All of them were naturally formed. Evidently, these things were also extremely precious in the divine realm. Merely, these sort of things were things that only the upper echelons of the divine realm could afford to play with. Qin understood that these things would definitely be useful in the divine realm. When Qin tried to absorb them using the Jianglan's realm, he discovered that these sculptures and works of art seemed to be protected by a sort of barrier. Even the Jianglan's realm was unable to absorb them. In the end, he could only helplessly leave this room. Why did that wood from earlier have the same color as jasper? Was it wood? Could it be that the master of the bewitching god temple had made a mistake in his annotations? Qin was still thinking about the cute rabbit formed from that jasper-like wood. Walking on the corridor, Qin looked to the remaining 3 rooms in this corridor. Which one should I enter? Qin divine awareness had been spread out the entire time. In this bewitching god temple, Qin divine awareness was only able to cover an area of 10 meters. Amen, that one will do. Qin chose a room and walked over. However, after taking 2 steps, Qin suddenly stopped. Qin gaze immediately shifted to a sculpture on the wall of the corridor. Something's wrong. Qin carefully inspected that sculpture with his divine awareness. With the current Qin comprehension of space, he was able to sense that the space where that sculpture was located was somewhat special. It was as if the space here had folded. With a flip of his hand, Qin took out a sword-shaped divine artifact. Using that divine sword, he attempted to touch that strange sculpture. Right when the tip of the divine sword touched that sculpture, the space suddenly twisted. At the same time, "Ga-ga," a series of sounds rang out. One of the walls of the corridor suddenly began to slowly rise upwards. After a short moment, a door appeared. So it turned out that there was a hidden room here. At this moment, a path appeared in Qin bewitching god painting. Qin held his breath and took a step forward, passing through that door. Once he entered the door, the scene suddenly changed. Qin, who was already experienced, was still relatively calm. Rumble! An enormous rumbling sound rang out. Waterfall. Qin stared at the scene in front of him and couldn't help but be astonished. A several 100-meter tall waterfall smashed down from above, landing on the enormous pool below and causing countless splashes of water. Chapter 459. This was a beautiful valley with birds chirping and flowers fragrant. The waterfall that was several 100 feet tall and nearly 10 feet wide fell from above like a curtain of white beads hanging down. Under the sunlight, the water droplets splashed up by the waterfall were like pearls, shining with a moving luster. Qin was standing in front of this pool of water. The waterfall hung down, but behind the waterfall, there was a steep and straight stone wall. There's no danger here at all. Qin was surprised to find that all the paths shown in the painting of the lost god were safe. Clearly, There was no danger in this valley at all. Qin Yu carefully looked in every direction. The flowers and plants that were brimming with vitality, the clear lake water, the warm breeze. Everything indicated that there was nothing special about this place. However, why would the master of the bewitching god temple hide this room? Wu Lan, I've entered a hidden room. This room was opened by me coincidentally, and now, I am unable to discover anything special about this room. Qin Yu once again asked Wu Lan via mind voice transmission. With Wu Lan here, Qin Yu would be an idiot if he didn't ask, and instead let his imagination run wild. Ever since Qin Yu entered the bewitching god temple, and asked Wu Lan for the first time, Wu Lan did not continue cultivating. He knew that Qin Yu could ask him at any moment. Hearing Qin Yu's question, Wu Lan instead pondered for a moment. He then said via mind voice transmission, Qin Yu, when I was in the bewitching god temple, I have never seen the hidden room you speak of, nor do I know anything about it. However, according to my understanding of the master of the bewitching god temple, he is not a senseless person. Since he has hidden that room, there must be an important reason for him to do so. Oh right, what did the bewitching god painting show? No, the painting of the lost god shows that this place is safe. Qin Yu replied inwardly, his eyes carefully observing his surroundings. At the same time, his divine sense slowly spread out. Since the painting of the bewitching god has indicated that it's safe, Qin Yu, you should carefully explore this place. You should also carefully explore some unremarkable places. Who knows, there might be some pleasant surprises, said Wu Lan with a smile. Qin Yu nodded. Qin Yu walked forward step by step, his gaze sweeping over the surroundings. His divine sense was also carefully sensing everything in this valley. Qin Yu's gaze suddenly locked onto a waterfall. To be precise, it was the mountain wall behind the waterfall. The mountain wall was yellow, but Qin Yu had just discovered a green color behind the waterfall. With Qin Yu's sharp eyes, he was able to determine that it was a cave. There's unexpectedly a cave behind the waterfall. If I hadn't been paying attention carefully, perhaps I wouldn't have been able to see the cave that was suddenly exposed by the waterfall just now. With a tap of his feet, Qin Yu shoots towards the waterfall like a sharp arrow. After passing through the waterfall, Qin Yu felt the scene in front of him change. Qin Yu's first impression upon entering the cave was cool and refreshing. The entrance to the cave was about 4 meters wide. Qin Yu only took 3 or 4 steps before he entered the cave. The layout of the cave was very natural. In the cave, there was a desk made of dark ancient wood. Beside the desk was a chair. Inside the cave, there were also some swaying vine nets. Presumably, when the master of the bewitching god temple was bored, he would lie down on the vine nets to rest. In this small cave, there was also a stream. Ding-dong sounds could be heard from time to time. On one side of the wall inside the cave, there were plants like ivy hanging on it. On the other side of the wall, there was a scarlet red color. On the scarlet red wall, there was a line of words. Entering my cave can be considered fate. You can take as much of the things I left behind in the bewitching god temple as you can. I'm not afraid of you taking too much. I'm only afraid that you don't have the ability to take them away. Words left by Che-ho. Che-ho. Qin Yu was slightly startled. Che-ho seems to be a surname. Che is also a surname. Is the master of the bewitching god temple called Che-ho, or is his surname Che-ho? When Qin Yu was in the hidden dragon continent, he had indeed seen the surname Che-ho. Although it was rare, it still existed. However, it was hard to say if this surname existed in the divine realm. Was this line of words left behind by a finger? The calligraphy is pretty good. Qin Yu walked to the side of the scarlet red mountain wall. However, below the scarlet red mountain wall was a stream. Qin Yu was unable to get too close to it. Separated by the stream, Qin Yu was only a few meters away from the line of words. Qin Yu used his divine consciousness to carefully observe the line of words. Qin Yu knew that he could not let anything go in this place. I don't believe that this hidden room is just a line of words left behind for me. Qin Yu carefully observed with his divine consciousness. Not only was it a line of words, Qin Yu was also observing the scarlet red wall. After observing for a long time, Qin Yu's expression began to change. At first it was confusion. However, gradually, it revealed a trace of pleasant surprise. That scarlet red mountain wall also started to slowly tremble. Spatial ripples were being transmitted on the surface of the wall. So that's the case. Qin Yu held onto a divine sword with one hand. His body suddenly leapt up. With the divine sword in his hand, he began to carve on the wall. After a series of flamboyant carving, a word appeared on the wall. Yuan. The word yuan that Qin Yu had carved seemed to occupy the entire scarlet red mountain wall. Buzz! The space within the cave started to tremble. Suddenly, the entire space seemed to be bathed in a layer of golden light. From the yuan that Qin Yu had carved, a dazzling white light shot out. That white light that shot out suddenly turned into a person. This person was very handsome. However, the hair on his temples had already turned white. He appeared to be in his 40s. However, his handsome face made him appear to be in his 20s or 30s. Those deep eyes of his were serene, and there was always a trace of indifference on his face. It seemed as though nothing could cause his expression to change. Hello, my name is Cheho Yuan. This man with white hair on his temples said indifferently. Cheho Yuan. So his name is Cheho Yuan. Qin Yu knew this in his heart. However, Qin Yu also had a feeling that the person in front of him should only be an image left behind, and not a clone of the bewitching god temple. This Cheho Yuan continued. This is an image that I left behind. For you to be able to discover the restriction that I left behind, it means that your soul's realm is truly pretty good. It's comparable to a relatively powerful deity. For there to be an expert like you in the immortal devil and demon realm, it's truly astonishing. Qin Yu was puzzled in his heart. If people from the divine realm were to descend to the mortal realm, wouldn't they still be able to enter? Although I, Cheho Yuan, am not very strong, my bewitching god temple has a restriction effect on people from the divine realm. Even if god kings wanted to enter, they would have to spend a great deal of effort. Furthermore, if an expert of the level of a god king were to forcibly barge into the bewitching god temple, it would self-destruct, said Cheho Yuan indifferently. Qin Yu's heart jumped. Although he did not know how strong the level of a god king was, since they were able to be called god kings, they were definitely not weak. Since you've found this place and opened the image that I left behind, you're the only person that has the opportunity to obtain the precious treasure of my bewitching god temple. Of course, whether or not you'll be able to obtain it will depend on your luck and ability, Cheho Yuan continued. Just by hearing Cheho Yuan's words, Qin Yu had a good impression of him. Although Cheho Yuan did not have a smile on his face, the way he spoke was very amiable. For you to be able to reach this place, you can be considered to be a genius of the immortal devil and demon realm. Before that, I'll first introduce you to the divine realm, Cheho Yuan continued. However, Qin Yu was puzzled. This Cheho Yuan had left behind a hidden room, and left behind this image. What exactly did he want? Merely, Qin Yu's curiosity about the divine realm still caused him to listen with rapt attention. After all, Wu Lan was only a low-level character in the divine realm. He didn't even know about many basic things. The divine realm belongs to a cosmic space of a higher level than your immortal, devil and demon realm. If my guess is correct, the divine realm ought to be the pinnacle of all cosmic spaces. Cheho Yuan slowly said. The divine realm contains divine spiritual energy. The entire divine realm possesses an extremely strong oppression toward people who come here. Generally, when deities that have just ascended enter the divine realm, they would be oppressed by the divine spiritual energy to the point where they could only barely walk. Qin Yu was startled. This divine realm was truly too astonishing. This divine realm was much stronger than the immortal, devil and demon realm. Even deities that have just ascended would only barely be able to walk in the divine realm. Simply speaking, the experts of the divine realm are divided into two great stages. One is the deity stage, and the other is the heavenly deity stage. The deities are divided into low-level deities, mid-level deities and high-level deities. Above them are the low-level heavenly deities, mid-level heavenly deities, and high-level heavenly deities. Cheho Yuan said and then paused for a moment. It was as if he knew that this information would shock Qin Yu. Qin Yu was indeed shocked. So this is how the experts of the divine realm are divided. Qin Yu felt a sense of security in his heart. The unknown was the most frightening thing. In the past he was completely ignorant of the divine realm. However, now he finally knew. The people of the divine realm were mainly divided into deities and heavenly deities. The soul of deities is at the soul Jindan stage. As for heavenly deities, they are at the soul nascent soul stage. At the same time, the power that deities use is only divine energy. As for the power that heavenly deities use, it is heavenly divine energy. Cheho Yuan continued. Qin Yu frowned. From what he heard, it seemed that the gap between deities and heavenly deities was very large. Suddenly, Cheho Yuan slightly raised his mouth. As if he had a trace of disdain, he said, "In the divine realm, although power and soul are important, however, other than that, weapons are also very important. Weapons are divided into low-quality divine artifacts, mid-quality divine artifacts and high-quality divine artifacts. Above them are low-quality heavenly divine artifacts, mid-quality heavenly divine artifacts and high-quality heavenly divine artifacts. There are a total of 6 great grades." A trace of confidence suddenly appeared on Cheho Yuan's face. Divine artifacts are generally used by deities. Divine artifacts are merely very ordinary weapons. Generally, people with some strength would be able to obtain them and pour their divine energy into the divine artifact to display a certain amount of power. As for heavenly divine artifacts, they are generally used by heavenly deities. A good weapon is capable of killing people of a higher level. Of course, power is not absolute. With a good strategy, a good method or some unexpected sneak attacks, deities are still capable of killing heavenly deities. Said Cheho Yuan indifferently. However, Qin Yu was a bit puzzled. Deities were divided into low quality, mid quality and high quality. Heavenly deities were divided into low quality, mid quality and high quality. From what he said, regardless of whether it was power or soul, heavenly deities were all stronger than deities. How could deities kill heavenly deities? The reason why heavenly deities are strong is because of their ability to control space. According to the strength of their ability to control space, they are divided into low-quality, mid-quality and high-quality heavenly deities. After Cheho Yuan finished saying those words, Qin Yu came to a sudden realization. So it turned out that heavenly deities were divided like this. The deities and heavenly deities that I spoke of earlier are merely the main levels. I am a high-quality heavenly deity, said Cheho Yuan indifferently. Only now did Qin Yu realize the strength of the master of the bewitching god temple, the strongest among the heavenly deities. Above the high-quality heavenly deity level, there is another level. Cheho Yuan continued. That is the God King level. God Kings are practically unparalleled existences in the divine realm. God Kings are people who have completely grasped the spatial laws. Qin Yu nodded in his heart. Heavenly deities were divided according to the level of their comprehension of the spatial laws. As for God Kings, they had already completely grasped the spatial laws. There was simply no need to think about their strength. In the divine realm, God Kings, to a certain extent, could be considered as the strongest. Merely, all of the divine realm's experts know that there is actually another level above the God King level. That is the omnipotent, unparalleled existence that could split the heaven and earth apart. The exalted celestial. As Cheho Yuan spoke till this point, his expression also slightly changed. It seemed that he was a bit excited. Qin Yu felt his heartbeat suddenly stop. Exalted celestial? With merely this title, Qin Yu felt a burst of oppression. Those who have completely grasped the spatial laws are God Kings. Although there are only a few God King level experts in the divine realm, those God King level experts still pursue a higher level. They pursue an even higher level of law, the temporal laws. Once they completely grasp the temporal laws, the spatial and temporal laws, they would become exalted celestials. Cheho Yuan sighed. According to the legends, exalted celestials are capable of splitting the heaven and earth apart, capable of destroying the heaven and earth. Even if one's soul is destroyed, as long as one's true spirit is still present, an exalted celestial would still be able to bring one back from the dead. This is the ability of an exalted celestial. They are absolutely unparalleled, absolutely supreme power. Qin Yu felt as if he was holding his breath. Merely this Cheho Yuan was able to give him an incomparable impression. Never did he expect that a god king would be even more powerful. Someone who had completely grasped the spatial laws. Even imagining it was frightening. However, above them were the exalted celestials. Exalted celestials. Before the exalted celestials, everyone was nothing more than ants. With a wave of their hand, the heaven and earth would collapse. Even with my status in the divine realm, I have only met a couple extraordinary god kings. As for the exalted celestials, back then, I was fortunate enough to chat with an exalted celestial. Unfortunately, I have never met that exalted celestial. Cheho Yuan sighed. Qin Yu had some speculations in his heart. This Cheho Yuan should not be an ordinary high-level heavenly deity. According to Cheho Yuan, exalted celestials were practically legendary characters in the divine realm. Yet, Cheho Yuan was able to chat with an exalted celestial. Even though they had never met, it was still extremely shocking. The reason why I am telling you all this is so that you have a rough idea of the level of experts in the divine realm. Actually, in the divine realm, as long as you are able to reach the heavenly deity level, as long as you do not provoke your enemies, you will be able to walk unhindered. After all, the divine realm is vast and boundless. There are only a few god kings with extremely high statuses. God kings would not be so bored as to take care of a nobody like you. Cheho Yuan said indifferently. Qin Yu understood Cheho Yuan's intentions very well. He reckoned that it would be impossible for him to even meet a god king, much less a supreme exalted celestial. Chapter 460. Cheho Yuan paused for a moment. Then he slowly said, "Youngster, after hearing so much from me, I'm afraid that your heart has also started to throb. However, you should not have extravagant hopes. That's because it is truly very difficult to increase one's comprehension of the spatial laws." Cheho Yuan sighed. Generally, after ascending to the divine realm, one would need tens of millions of years, or even hundreds of millions of years, to reach the high-level deity level from the low-level deity level. Qin Yu nodded in his heart. Through Lu Xing's tear, that Zuoqiumei had left him the comprehension of the spatial laws. However, even though he possessed such an advantage, after spending an entire 3,000 years, his soul was still at the Soul Jin Dan realm. Clearly, Qin Yu's comprehension of the spatial laws was inferior to that of a low-level heavenly deity. After all, when one's soul reached the low-level heavenly deity level, one's soul would form the nascent soul. Qin Yu had spent 3,000 years. However, ordinary deities would not necessarily be able to reach his current level, even if they spent 30 million years. To reach the low-level heavenly deity level? Difficult. Qin Yu did not have extravagant hopes. He merely wanted to diligently train step by step. Back then, I was merely a child who was unable to even train in internal techniques, and could only rely on external techniques to step onto the path of cultivation. I have reached the level where I could move unhindered in the immortal, devil and demon realm. What is impossible in this world? Although I am currently weak, as long as I work hard, I will definitely succeed. Qin Yu's heart was incomparably firm. Toward the long and endless path of cultivation, Qin Yu had never feared it. In the divine realm, as long as you reach the low-level heavenly deity level, you would be considered an expert in the divine realm. At the very least, as long as you do not provoke others, no one would dare to provoke a low-level heavenly deity. Cheho Yuan consoled. Qin Yu smiled bitterly. Low-level heavenly deity? Although he did not wish to provoke others. But for example, Li Er's cousin Zhou Xian, Uncle Lan had mentioned before. There were many people in the divine realm that wanted to marry Li Er. He wanted to defeat that group of people. How could he do that without sufficient strength? Cheho Yuan had only left behind an image. Naturally, he did not know what Qin Yu was thinking. Cheho Yuan was silent for a long time. "I am an artifact craftsman." Cheho Yuan, who had been silent for a long time, suddenly said these words. Qin Yu paused for a moment then smiled. Qin Yu had already guessed Cheho Yuan's identity, just by looking at the large amount of divine artifacts scattered outside the bewitching god temple. Even high-quality divine artifacts were thrown outside like trash. One could guess what was going on. Cheho Yuan continued. The weapons that I mentioned earlier are divided into divine artifacts and heavenly divine artifacts. However, generally, the pinnacle of heavenly divine artifacts would be high-quality heavenly divine artifacts. This is artificially refined. In the universe, there is another type of treasure called the Grand Mist Spiritual Treasure. Cheho Yuan's eyes suddenly burst forth with radiance. Grand Mist Spiritual Treasure? At this moment, Qin Yu didn't dare to let his imagination run wild. He firmly engraved everything that Cheho Yuan said in his mind. After all, everything that Cheho Yuan said would be of help to him in his journey to the divine realm. Grand Mist Spiritual Treasures are divided into two types: innate Grand Mist Spiritual Treasures and acquired Grand Mist Spiritual Treasures. Among them, innate Grand Mist Spiritual Treasures are born from the heavens and earth. Practically every innate Grand Mist Spiritual Treasure possesses extraordinary abilities. Even the best ones are capable of destroying the heavens, exterminating the earth, or bringing the dead back to life. Cheho Yuan slowly said, "Innate Grand Mist Spiritual Treasures? Born from the heavens and earth?" Qin Yu was stunned. Spiritual treasures could be born from the boundless universe? After all, in all these years, Qin Yu knew that some of the powerful weapons were artificially refined. Between innate Grand Mist Spiritual Treasures and heavenly divine artifacts, which one is more powerful? Qin Yu suddenly guessed in his heart. Cheho Yuan seemed to know that Qin Yu was puzzled. He said, "It is very hard to say how powerful innate Grand Mist Spiritual Treasures are. That is because there are second and third-rated innate Grand Mist Spiritual Treasures, and there are also first-rated innate Grand Mist Spiritual Treasures. The weaker innate Grand Mist Spiritual Treasures are even weaker than ordinary heavenly divine artifacts." Qin Yu came to a realization. Innate Grand Mist Spiritual Treasures merely represented that they were born from the heavens and earth. Their might not necessarily be stronger than heavenly divine artifacts. However, being born from the heavens and earth still possesses its miraculous aspects. A first-rate innate Grand Mist Spiritual Treasure possesses an extremely powerful might. It is much more powerful than a high-quality heavenly divine artifact. As for the legendary spiritual treasures possessed by exalted celestials, they possess the might to split apart the heavens and earth. They are known as exalted celestial spiritual treasures. Cheho Yuan's gaze began to blaze. Exalted celestial spiritual treasures were the most revered among Grand Mist spiritual treasures. Grand Mist spiritual treasures are divided into innate and acquired. I have already mentioned innate Grand Mist spiritual treasures earlier. As for acquired Grand Mist spiritual treasures, they are refined by humans. Cheho Yuan slowly said. Hearing those words, Qin Yu was shocked. Acquired Grand Mist spiritual treasures, even if they were acquired, were still very powerful. There is no difference in strength between innate Grand Mist spiritual treasures and acquired Grand Mist spiritual treasures. They are still third-rate, second-rate, and first-rate. Merely, one is born from the heavens and earth, whereas the other is refined by humans. To refine acquired Grand Mist spiritual treasures, in the entire divine realm, there are not many people who possess the strength to do so. As for me, I am one of them. Cheho Yuan had a confident expression on his face. That was the confidence of someone who had reached the pinnacle of a field. As far as I know, the legendary exalted celestials are capable of refining acquired Grand Mist spiritual treasures. Among those god kings, there seems to be one or two who know how to refine acquired Grand Mist spiritual treasures. As for heavenly deities, I am the only one who knows how to do so. Cheho Yuan's voice was resounding and powerful. Qin Yu grew slightly excited. If he was able to learn the method to refine acquired Grand Mist spiritual treasures, it would likely be of great help to his journey in the divine realm. Do you know why Grand Mist spiritual treasures are called Grand Mist spiritual treasures? Cheho Yuan asked. After a short moment, Cheho Yuan said himself. It is because Grand Mist spiritual energy is contained within Grand Mist spiritual treasures. Qin Yu grew puzzled. What is Grand Mist spiritual energy? In Qin Yu's mind, there was the so-called spiritual energy of heaven and earth from the mortal realm. There was also the so-called elemental spirit energy from the immortal, devil and demon realm. There was also the divine spirit energy from the divine realm that Cheho Yuan had mentioned earlier. As for Grand Mist spiritual energy, Qin Yu did not know about it at all. This Grand Mist spiritual energy is something that every Grand Mist spiritual treasure possesses. Grand Mist spiritual energy can only be encountered by chance and not sought. Even in the divine realm, even God Kings would find it very difficult to obtain Grand Mist spiritual energy. One would only be able to obtain it by chance if one is lucky. Cheho Yuan said indifferently, "Back in the divine realm, there was once a God King expert who asked me to help refine a Grand Mist spiritual treasure. He gave me 10 portions of Grand Mist spiritual energy. Generally, I would keep 3 portions of Grand Mist spiritual energy for myself." Qin Yu could not help but laugh in his heart. This Cheho Yuan was truly treacherous. There are 2 ways to obtain Grand Mist spiritual energy. One is to try one's luck and find it all over the place. The second way is to refine an old Grand Mist spiritual treasure and obtain the Grand Mist spiritual energy within it. Cheho Yuan shook his head and sighed. "In my life, I have once refined a first-rate Grand Mist spiritual treasure. However, my greatest wish is still to be able to refine an exalted celestial spiritual treasure." Qin Yu's heart jumped. This Cheho Yuan's goal was truly ambitious. He wanted to refine the most powerful exalted celestial spiritual treasure. In merely terms of refining techniques, even the exalted celestials of the divine realm would likely be inferior to me, Cheho Yuan suddenly said. Truly arrogant. Qin Yu was unable to refrain himself from laughing. That is because the legendary exalted celestials, the best weapons they could refine were only first-rate Grand Mist spiritual treasures. As for exalted celestial spiritual treasures, they were all born naturally. They were not refined by them, as they controlled the spatial and temporal laws. They were only able to refine first-rate Grand Mist spiritual treasures. As for me, a mere high-level heavenly deity, I was able to refine a first-rate Grand Mist spiritual treasure. In terms of refining techniques, one can tell who is superior with a single glance. Cheho Yuan said confidently. Hearing what Cheho Yuan said, Qin Yu also started to admire this Cheho Yuan. After studying the path of artifact refinement for so many years, not long ago, I suddenly came to a realization. Actually, the more precious the materials, the better. In order to refine an exalted celestial spiritual treasure, merely Grand Mist spiritual energy, and all sorts of top-quality materials from the divine realm would not be enough. Thus, I descended to the lower realm. Cheho Yuan continued. I traveled through numerous cosmic spaces to search for some exotic materials that would be helpful to me in my refinement. Younger generation of the immortal devil and demon realm. By the time you see this image, I would have already left the bewitching God Temple. Cheho Yuan's eyes shined. That is because not long ago, when I was searching for materials in a space, I suddenly came to a realization. I think that I should be able to refine an exalted celestial spiritual treasure. Qin Yu felt a buzzing sound in his head. Refining an exalted celestial spiritual treasure? How could this Cheho Yuan be that powerful? Of course, it is merely a possibility. However, since there is a possibility, I will go all out. Thus I left this place. I need to wholeheartedly refine that exalted celestial spiritual treasure. After saying those words, a rare smile suddenly appeared on Cheho Yuan's face. I don't know if I will be able to succeed this time around. I even have a feeling that the day I succeed in refining the exalted celestial spiritual treasure would be the day I die. Qin Yu frowned. You still don't understand. Your comprehension of the mysteries of heaven is still very low, Cheho Yuan said in disappointment and frustration. However, even if I die, I still want to create an exalted celestial spiritual treasure. Qin Yu began to admire Cheho Yuan. This sort of person who was willing to sacrifice his life for his ideal goal was worthy of admiration. Younger generation of the immortal devil and demon realm, you have yet to ascend. Even if your soul's level is high, I reckon that your strength is still not that great. I reckon, with your current strength, it is simply impossible for you to enter the Artifacts Palace and Refining Flames Palace, where the true treasures of the Bewitching God Temple are located. Cheho Yuan suddenly changed the topic. Senior Cheho Yuan, you might be looking down on me. Qin Yu thought aloud. Since you've found this place and seen the image I left behind, I cannot let you return empty-handed. Cheho Yuan had a light smile on his face. The Bewitching God Temple has a total of 4 palaces and a courtyard in the center. When you leave the front palace and enter the courtyard, you should be able to see a spear inserted next to a flower bed in the courtyard. Qin Yu was overjoyed. It would appear that he would be able to obtain a powerful treasure. Cheho Yuan's gaze turned misty. This spear is not a grand spiritual treasure. It is a high-quality heavenly divine artifact. Not a grand spiritual treasure? Qin Yu was slightly disappointed. According to what he had heard earlier, this grand spiritual treasure seemed to be very powerful. Cheho Yuan continued. It does not possess grand spiritual energy. Thus, it is only a high-quality heavenly divine artifact. However, this spear is something that I gathered from the divine realm's rare materials and spent an entire 3 years to craft. This is the high-quality heavenly divine artifact that I am most proud of. Even though it does not possess grand spiritual energy, in terms of might, ordinary grand spiritual treasures are still inferior to it. Regardless of how calm Qin Yu was, he was still unable to help himself from being moved. This Cheho Yuan had chosen to gift him this spear, so it turned out that it was actually the high-quality heavenly divine artifact that Cheho Yuan was most proud of. When you arrive at your courtyard and see that spear, write the character Yuan on the spear shaft. It will automatically break the barrier on the surface of the spear. That spear will then belong to you, said Cheho Yuan. Qin Yu firmly remembered that. Well then, you can leave this room now, said Cheho Yuan indifferently. After that, the image slowly dissipated. Senior Cheho Yuan, thank you. Qin Yu bowed respectfully. Although he knew that the image before him was not the real person, Qin Yu still admired a genius like Cheho Yuan. Even more so, he admired Cheho Yuan for putting forth so much effort to craft an exalted celestial spiritual treasure, even though he knew that it might cause his death. Qin Yu exited the mountain, passed through the waterfall and left the room. Gaga! Right after Qin Yu exited the room, the walls of the corridor once again descended. The room was once again hidden. This time around, Qin Yu did not explore the rooms one by one. That was because from Cheho Yuan's words, he understood that even if there were some treasures in these rooms, they would not amount to much. The true treasure would still be that high-quality heavenly divine artifact that Cheho Yuan was most proud of. After exiting this corridor, Qin Yu entered another corridor. After walking to the end of the corridor, Qin Yu finally saw a passage. That passage led to the courtyard. I'm about to obtain the high-quality heavenly divine artifact divine spear. I must not be careless and end up like immortal emperor in Aiyang. Qin Yu laughed at himself. His divine awareness completely covered an area of 10 meters around him. Actually, even if Qin Yu was poisoned by the divine realm's poisonous insects, he would not end up like immortal emperor in Aiyang. Back then, immortal emperor in Aiyang's soul was only at the level of a level 8 immortal emperor. As for Qin Yu, his soul had already reached the level of Jin Dan. It was even stronger than ordinary deities. Furthermore, Qin Yu also had Lu Xing's tears. After walking out of the passage, Qin Yu finally stepped into the courtyard. This courtyard was very spacious. In the entire courtyard, there was only a single large tree. This large tree required 3 or 4 people to surround it. However, its height was only about 20 meters. However, the tree crown covered an extremely wide area. Its diameter was over 100 meters. In the courtyard there was a long stone bench. Beside the stone bench, there was also a row of weapons. Blades, spears, sticks and all kinds of exotic weapons. According to Qin Yu's knowledge, that row of weapons would likely surpass high-quality divine artifacts. They ought to be low-quality heavenly divine artifacts. Are those the poisonous insects that caused immortal emperor in Aiyang's death? Qin Yu saw that in front of the row of weapons, There were actually several tins of insect corpses. Back then, after Immortal Emperor and I Yang left Emperor Yu and the others behind and arrived at the courtyard, was he so excited that he wanted to obtain those weapons that he did not care about the insects beneath his feet? Seeing the scene before him, Qin Yu was able to imagine what had happened back then. After a short moment, Qin Yu's gaze was cast toward a simple and unadorned long spear, inserted into the flower bed on the left side of the courtyard. Immortal Emperor and I Yang, how could you possibly know that this seemingly ordinary long spear is actually a weapon even more precious than that row of weapons? Qin Yu walked toward the long spear. Chapter 461. Secluded Courtyard. Tall and sturdy trees. Qin Yu slowly walked toward the spear inserted into the ground beside the flower bed. At the same time, he was carefully inspecting the high-quality heavenly divine artifact that the master of the Bewitching God Temple, Cheho Yuan, was most proud of. The spear was simple and unadorned black in color. The spearhead was shining. Only the edge of the spearhead had a trace of blood-red color that added to its murderous aura. Merely at this moment, the trace of blood on the edge of the spearhead was somewhat dim. Upon seeing this spear, Qin Yu immediately fell in love with it. He liked this simple and unadorned spear that contained a trace of murderous aura. The master of the Bewitching God Temple's attainments in formation arrays and barriers are astonishingly high. Qin Yu walked to the spear with a smile on his face. He then wrote a Yuan character on the spear with his finger. Right after he finished writing the Yuan character, the spear immediately started to emit a faint blood-red radiance. Qin Yu seemed to have smelled a bloody murderous aura. His gaze that looked at the spear grew even brighter. That blood-red radiance disappeared after a short moment. Merely, the appearance of the spear had changed greatly. The shaft of the spear was dark black and emitted a deep and enchanting luster. It was as if it could devour souls. The spearhead was bright and shiny. Its sharpness was so great that one would feel a chill from the bottom of one's heart just by looking at it. On the edge of the flat spearhead, there was a bright-colored trace of blood. That trace of blood extended from the edge of the spearhead and coiled around the entire spearhead. Upon seeing it, Qin Yu felt an urge to kill. Heavenly divine artifact. I wonder if I'll be able to refine it. Qin Yu muttered. You can refine it. Suddenly a voice sounded. Qin Yu jumped in fright. He immediately turned around to look. However, there was no one behind him. Qin Yu couldn't help having a shocked expression. What the hell is this? I clearly heard someone speak earlier. I'm here. The voice sounded from the side. With lightning speed, Qin Yu turned around to look. He saw a kind-looking old grandfather walking over. This kind-looking old man continued to say, Young man from the immortal devil and demon realm, can you tell me your name? Qin Yu frowned as he looked to the man in front of him. He started to feel puzzled. Who is he? According to the words of the Bewitching God Temple's master, there shouldn't be anyone here. Where did this expert come from? The reason why he said he was an expert was because Qin Yu couldn't sense the aura of the person in front of him at all. Qin Yu dared to say that the person in front of him must be terrifyingly strong. He might even be a heavenly god expert from the divine world. My name is Qin Yu. May I ask who you are, senior? Qin Yu immediately asked. Where did this old man come from? Would he snatch away his high-quality heavenly divine artifact spear? Me. I am the housekeeper of the Bewitching God Temple, Afu. This name was bestowed upon me by my master. The benevolent old man said with a smile. Qin Yu, you can address me as Uncle Fu now. If you become the master of the Bewitching God Temple one day, you can also address me as Afu. Qin Yu was stunned. This great expert in front of him was actually called Fu? That master of the Bewitching God Temple was truly treating it as child's play. Uncle Fu, why are you in the Bewitching God Temple? Qin Yu asked. Uncle Fu lightly smiled and said, Me, I have been living in the Bewitching God Temple the entire time. I have never left the Bewitching God Temple. Even the scenes of the people from the immortal devil and demon realm coming to try their luck and find some divine artifacts. I have always seen them. Qin Yu couldn't help but feel ashamed in his heart. It would appear that everything that he had done in the Bewitching God Temple was clearly seen by this Uncle Fu. According to the order my master left behind before he left, as long as one obtains my master's last words, one would be considered as my master's sole successor. As for you, you can now be considered as my master's sole successor. Uncle Fu said. Qin Yu felt a burst of dizziness. However, Qin Yu immediately recalled the words the master of the bewitching god temple, Cheho Yuan, had said. Since you've found this place and also opened the image I left behind, you are the only person with the opportunity to obtain the treasures of my bewitching god temple. Of course, whether or not you'll be able to obtain them will depend on your luck and ability. Combining the words spoken by Cheho Yuan and the words spoken by Uncle Fu before him, Qin Yu understood one thing. Opening the image meant that he had inherited the bewitching god temple. However, as for what he would obtain, it would still depend on his own ability. Qin Yu, although you can be considered as my master's sole successor, according to the order my master left behind before he left, you must possess sufficient strength in order to obtain the 2 great palaces left behind by my master. Of course, even if you don't possess sufficient strength, merely by opening my master's hidden room, you are qualified to obtain this divine spear, said Uncle Fu with a smile. Qin Yu nodded. This Uncle Fu said that he would inherit the 2 great palaces left behind by the master of the bewitching god temple. Which 2 great palaces? Qin Yu, this spear is a high-quality heavenly divine artifact. With your current soul cultivation, you should be able to refine it, said Uncle Fu with a smile. Why aren't you dripping your blood on this heavenly divine artifact to refine it? Qin Yu nodded. He extended his right hand and grabbed the spear. Heart-penetrating coldness. That dark black spear shaft passed through Qin Yu's palm and gave him an ice-cold feeling. Without the slightest hesitation, Qin Yu immediately dripped a drop of blood from his finger. Buzz! After absorbing Qin Yu's drop of blood, the spear immediately started to slightly tremble. A faint crimson-colored radiance was once again emitted from it. The blood threads spiraling around the tip of the spear also became even brighter. Qin Yu clearly felt a connection between this spear and his soul. The name of this spear is Waning Snow. It's a high-quality heavenly divine artifact, indestructible. It possesses the 2 great auxiliary effects of body shattering and soul devouring. In an instant, a series of information regarding the divine spear, Waning Snow, appeared in Qin Yu's mind. After Qin Yu completely comprehended the attack power of this divine spear, he couldn't help but feel astonished. With this divine spear, my attack power has increased by at least 10 times. Qin Yu was overjoyed. It can be said to be indestructible. Furthermore, it can completely shatter the opponent's body and increase its attack power. At the same time, it also possesses the soul-devouring effect. It's truly powerful. Seeing Qin Yu's reaction, Uncle Fu laughed and said, only with the soul-devouring effect can it be considered an exceptional treasure. Back then, Master had gathered all kinds of top-quality materials from the divine realm and spent 3 years of painstaking effort to craft this high-quality heavenly divine artifact. Generally, only powerful grand mist spiritual treasures possess the soul-devouring effect. However, this high-quality heavenly divine artifact possesses the soul-devouring effect. There is no need to mention how precious this divine spear Waning Snow is. Qin Yu nodded excitedly. Soul-devouring. That was the soul-devouring effect. To the true experts of the divine realm, merely physical attacks would not have much of an effect. Their true weakness was the soul. Only by extinguishing the soul would one be able to achieve true victory. As long as one was struck by this divine spear, even if one's body was not injured, one's soul would be weakened. If one were to be struck by the divine spear too many times, one's soul might even be shattered. The might of the divine spear was something that one could imagine. Body shattering. If the opponent's strength is too strong, it'll be hard to shatter the body. Qin Yu said with a smile. Uncle Fu nodded and said, body shattering is only an effect of the blood vein imprint on the spearhead of the divine spear Waning Snow. Even if the opponent's body is very strong and cannot shatter his body, it will still leave a hole in his body. Qin Yu held the spear with one hand and waved it twice. He was very satisfied. Yu was quite proficient in using the spear. Uncle Fu, earlier, you said that I am able to refine this divine spear waning snow. How did you determine that? Yu thought of this. Refining a treasure generally depended on one's soul's realm. And now, even though Yu's soul's realm was very strong, he was still unable to refine even Lu Xing's tear. Uncle Fu said with a smile, refining a weapon indeed depends on one's soul's realm. I can tell you that the immortal devil and demon realms immortals are able to refine divine artifacts. However, only those whose soul's realm has reached the deity realm can refine heavenly divine artifacts. Back then, there was also someone from the immortal devil and demon realm that came in. Unfortunately, his soul's realm was too weak. He was unable to even withstand the poison of the divine realm's poisonous insects. Even if he were to refine a heavenly divine artifact, he would still not have the ability to do so. Uncle Fu said with a light smile. Yu nodded in understanding. So heavenly divine artifacts required one's soul to be at the deity realm to refine them. Now that his soul had reached the Soul Jindan realm, that is the deity realm, why was he unable to refine Lu Xing's tear? What exactly was this Lu Xing's tear? Uncle Fu, are there any treasures that even deities are unable to refine? Yu asked. There are. Uncle Fu nodded and said, heavenly divine artifacts and divine artifacts are all created by humans. Thus, refining them is relatively easy. There's also another type of weapon, Grand Mist spiritual treasure. Grand Mist spiritual treasures are very hard to refine. Yu thought of 3 items, Jianglan's realm, Lu Xing's tear, and the golden bead that he obtained from the 14-star Emperor level Dark Star. He was unable to completely refine any of these 3 items. How hard is it to refine a Grand Mist spiritual treasure? Yu hurriedly asked. It's not that they're hard to refine. Grand Mist spiritual treasures possess spirituality. In order to refine a Grand Mist spiritual treasure, not only does it depend on one's ability, it also depends on one's luck and many other aspects. Uncle Fu had followed the master of the Bewitching God Temple for many years. Thus he knew a lot. For some Grand Mist spiritual treasures, if fated, even an ordinary person would be able to completely refine them. However, for some Grand Mist spiritual treasures, even heavenly deities would find it hard to refine them. Uncle Fu smiled. Grand Mist spiritual treasures contain Grand Mist spiritual energy. In order to refine them, firstly, it depends on one's ability and secondly, it depends on one's luck. Of course, the higher one's soul's level, the easier it would be for one to successfully refine a Grand Mist spiritual treasure. Uncle Fu concluded. Yu pondered and nodded. Now Yu somewhat understood. Grand Mist spiritual treasures. Regardless of whether they were innate Grand Mist spiritual treasures nurtured by the world, or acquired Grand Mist spiritual treasures refined by humans, they all contain Grand Mist spiritual energy. It was not that easy to refine them. The Jianglan's realm was refined by Uncle Lan. It ought to be an acquired Grand Mist spiritual treasure. Yu thought in his heart. Even with his current strength, he was unable to completely open the 3rd layer space of the Jianglan's realm. Thus, Yu naturally came to this conclusion. As for Lu Xing's tear, I had already absorbed it into my body when I was still immortal. It could be considered to have recognized me as its master. However, even now, I am still unable to completely control Lu Xing's tear. It would appear that it is also a Grand Mist spiritual treasure. Yu started to laugh. Although he was still unable to completely control it, in the mortal realm, that Lu Xing's tear had recognized him as its master. Evidently, there was fate between him and Lu Xing's tear. It was possible for Grand Mist spiritual treasures to be refined by mortals. This was indeed true. Unfortunately, that golden bead, even my soul's energy was frozen upon contact with it. I truly do not know how to refine it. Yu thought in his heart. He then shook his head and stopped thinking about it. After putting away the high-quality heavenly divine artifact Waning Snow, Yu began to chat with the housekeeper of the Bewitching God Temple, Uncle Fu, while walking toward the row of weapons on the weapon rack. Back then, that man from the immortal devil and demon realm, who came in here with the Bewitching God painting, had stepped on a dead poisonous bug. Sai, with such a weak soul, he still vainly attempted to obtain a heavenly divine artifact. Wasn't he simply courting death? Said Uncle Fu with a light smile. Qin Yu looked at the dead poisonous bugs on the ground. Uncle Fu, are these poisonous bugs very poisonous? Qin Yu asked. Not at all. If one's soul reaches the deity level and forms the soul Jin Dan, even if one were to be poisoned by these poisonous bugs, one would only need to spend a short amount of time to remove the poison. However, if one's soul has yet to form the soul Jin Dan, then once one is poisoned, one will undoubtedly die. Said Uncle Fu indifferently. Qin Yu nodded. He then walked toward the row of heavenly divine artifacts on the weapon rack. These are all heavenly divine artifacts, right? What are their grades? Qin Yu asked. Uncle Fu nodded and said, these heavenly divine artifacts are all some decorations casually crafted by my master. They're merely weapons crafted using some discarded materials left behind by customers. They're all low-quality heavenly divine artifacts and do not have any special effects. They're very ordinary. Qin Yu sighed in his heart. Discarded materials left behind by customers. This master of the bewitching god temple was truly powerful. He casually crafted a row of heavenly divine artifacts and threw them here as decorations. If you want to take them, then take them. However, you don't have a heavenly divine artifact level spatial ring, right? It'll be hard for you to take them. Said Uncle Fu with a light smile. Qin Yu merely smiled mysteriously. Walking to the front of the weapon rack, Qin Yu's intention moved. Retrieve. The weapon rack disappeared into thin air. Of course, the row of low-quality heavenly divine artifacts on the weapon rack were also absorbed into the Jianglan's realm by Qin Yu. You. Uncle Fu looked at Qin Yu with shock. You have a heavenly divine artifact level spatial ring? Spatial storage items are extremely hard to craft. My master hates crafting this sort of item the most. On the other hand, those god kings with mediocre crafting abilities who have grasped the spatial laws would have an easier time crafting spatial rings. Qin Yu lightly smiled. Everyone has their own specialization. The god king experts who stood at the peak of the divine realm had completely grasped the spatial laws. Thus, crafting spatial rings would naturally not be too hard for them. No matter how powerful Cheho Yuan was, his comprehension of the spatial laws was still inferior to that of a god king. Uncle Fu, earlier, you said that there were 2 palaces left behind by the master of the bewitching god temple. Which 2 palaces are they? Qin Yu had been worried about them the entire time. I know that you've been worried about them the entire time. Uncle Fu turned around and looked to the palaces behind and to the right. He then said, Qin Yu, this bewitching god temple is divided into 4 great palaces. They are the Front Palace, the Transfer Palace, the Artifacts Palace, and the Refining Flames Palace. As for my master, practically all of his treasures were hidden in the Artifacts Palace and the Refining Flames Palace. Chapter 462. Artifacts Palace? Refining Flames Palace? Qin Yu felt his heart fiercely jump. The status of the master of the bewitching god temple in the divine realm was something that Qin Yu was able to guess. How astonishing would all the treasures left behind by such a person be? The palace opposite the Front Palace is the Artifacts Palace. The palace on the left side of the courtyard is called the Transfer Palace. The palace on the right side is called the Refining Flames Palace. Uncle Fu pointed to the 3 palaces and explained. Qin Yu's gaze was involuntarily cast toward the 3 palaces. The entrance to the Transfer Palace was wide open. It should be very easy to enter. However, the entrance to the Artifacts Palace and the Refining Flames Palace were tightly closed. Master's artifact crafting ability could be said to be unparalleled in the entire divine realm. Among them, the Refining Flames Palace is the place where Master would usually craft artifacts. This Refining Flames Palace contains Master's artifact crafting experience. There are also many tools for crafting artifacts and so on inside. Said Uncle Fu with a smile. The gaze that Qin Yu looked at the Refining Flames Palace with immediately became blazing hot. Qin Yu knew very well that regardless of whether it was the divine realm, the immortal devil and demon realm, or the mortal realm, strength reigned supreme. In a world where strength reigns supreme, one could imagine how revered the status of a master who possessed the best artifact crafting ability would be. Cheho Yuan had also said that there were God King level experts who had come to ask him for help in crafting grand spiritual treasures. When one reached Cheho Yuan's level of artifact crafting, even God Kings would sometimes come to ask for help. One could imagine Cheho Yuan's status. If I were to learn this artifact crafting ability, the difficulty of making Li Er my wife ought to be much lower. Qin Yu's heart began to fluctuate. Qin Yu also understood that although he had obtained the artifact crafting experience, he would still need to spend a large amount of time to comprehend it in order to become an artifact crafting master. However, if he did not have this artifact crafting experience, then no matter how hard he worked, it would still be very difficult for him to obtain great accomplishments in artifact crafting. After all, the people at the pinnacle of all trades and professions were not only people who needed to work hard, they also needed to possess heavenly talent. Uncle Fu continued, although there aren't many treasures in the Refining Flames Palace, it contains master's artifact crafting experience. Thus, it could be considered as the most important place in the Bewitching God Temple. There are 2 requirements to open the Refining Flames Palace. What requirements? Qin Yu blurted out. Even someone as calm as he was unable to suppress his thirst for the artifact crafting experience. Master once said that only his disciples are qualified to inherit the Refining Flames Palace. Therefore, there are 2 requirements for opening the Refining Flames Palace. The first is, the true flame in your body must have reached the white pure flame realm. Uncle Fu said with a faint smile. White pure fire? Qin Yu felt his heart stop for a moment before he recovered. What level of flame is the white pure fire? Uncle Fu explained. Under normal circumstances, the primordial fire of a god is the black primordial fire, and the primordial fire of an Empyrean god is the white primordial fire. And to learn Master's refining method, even the entry requirement is white pure fire. The flame required to enter the sect was white pure fire? Qin Yu felt bitter in his heart. This weapon refining Grandmaster's refining experience was indeed precious, but the requirements to learn it were also shockingly abnormal. Fortunately, his stellar transformations cultivation technique was also special. Now that he was at the origin realm, his true fire was a black divine flame. Qin Yu suddenly thought in his heart. This Cheho Yuan had once said that the Bewitching God Temple would block the people from the divine realm. How could someone who has not reached the deity realm have a white pure fire? Uncle Fu seemed to have guessed what Qin Yu was thinking. He continued. Master had already thought that it was impossible for the true flames of the people of the immortal, devil and demon realm to be white pure fire. Thus, he moved an item from the Refining Flames Palace to the Artifacts Palace. Qin Yu stared at Uncle Fu. What's in the Artifacts Palace? Qin Yu asked. There are a lot of things hidden in the Artifacts Palace. For example, there are some precious refining materials. Master's refining materials are all placed in the Artifacts Palace. At the same time, there are also some heavenly divine artifacts, and even some acquired grand spiritual treasures. Uncle Fu said solemnly. Even though he was already prepared, Qin Yu still couldn't help but look toward the Artifacts Palace again. Cheho Yuan's refining materials? Precious heavenly divine artifacts? Precious acquired grand spiritual treasures? The Artifacts Palace is where all kinds of Master's treasures are hidden. You still have the opportunity to obtain them, said Uncle Fu with a smile. There are a lot of things in the Artifacts Palace. It's also very complicated. There are also precious items like divine spirit crystal souls. There are even some machines refined by Master and so on. Qin Yu nodded his head. It seemed that practically all of the treasures of the Bewitching God Temple were hidden in the Artifacts Palace. As for the Refining Flames Palace, there were only some refining experiences and some tools. Qin Yu suddenly asked. Uncle Fu, you said earlier that the Master of the Bewitching God Temple had moved an item from the Refining Flames Palace to the Artifacts Palace. What was it? Qin Yu had a premonition that the item that was moved would not be ordinary. Uncle Fu smiled and said, It was 9 purple origin flame beads. 9 purple origin flame beads? What are purple origin flame beads? Qingyu was puzzled. He had never heard of something like purple origin flame beads. Uncle Fu explained. The purple origin flame beads are 9 flame beads born from the world. They can be considered as innate Grand Mist spiritual treasures. Since they were Grand Mist spiritual treasures, they shouldn't be bad. Qingyu thought in his heart. However, the purple origin flame beads can only be considered as third-rate Grand Mist spiritual treasures. In terms of preciousness, they are inferior to your high-quality heavenly divine artifact, the divine spear waning snow, said Uncle Fu with a light smile. Qingyu nodded his head thoughtfully. He knew about this. Grand Mist spiritual treasures only represented that they contain Grand Mist spiritual energy. Their might not necessarily be stronger than heavenly divine artifacts. It also depended on the level of the Grand Mist spiritual treasure. A third-rate Grand Mist spiritual treasure like this could not be considered much. Uncle Fu's tone suddenly changed. He said, however, the 9 purple origin flame beads were refined by Master. I don't know what sort of method he used, but Master managed to connect the 9 purple origin flame beads into one. Their might increased greatly, and at the same time, they became the core of the entire Bewitching God Temple. The core. Qingyu felt as if he had thought of something. Uncle Fu nodded. That's right. These 9 purple origin flame beads were in the Refining Flames Palace in the past. That's because the fire energy extracted from them would allow Master to refine artifacts more easily. This time, when Master left, he placed these 9 purple origin flame beads in the Artifacts Palace. As long as you refine these 9 purple origin flame beads into your body, the entire Bewitching God Temple will be yours. The entire Bewitching God Temple belongs to you. Qingyu couldn't help but feel joyous. This is rather similar to the Qingyu Immortal Mansion. The Qingyu Immortal Mansion also has a core of elemental spirit essence. This Bewitching God Temple also has a core. Master had once told me that it's difficult to open the Refining Flames Palace. As long as you are able to open the Artifacts Palace and refine the 9 purple origin flame beads, you'll be considered to have obtained the Bewitching God Temple. You can carry the Bewitching God Temple with you. When your strength reaches a certain level, you'll naturally be able to open the Refining Flames Palace, said Uncle Fu. Qingyu suddenly recalled a matter. Uncle Fu, earlier, you said that there are 2 great requirements to open the Refining Flames Palace. You said one of them is that one's true flame must reach the white pure flame realm. What's the other one? Qingyu suddenly asked. The difficulty of the second one is too great. Uncle Fu sighed. When your true flame reaches the white pure flame realm, you'll be able to open the entrance of the Refining Flames Palace. However, after entering the Refining Flames Palace, you'll encounter 3 great formations. You must break through all 3 of them. The second requirement is that your understanding of the divine realm's formation arrays and barriers must reach an extremely high level. Qingyu was speechless. Formation arrays and barriers? Qingyu knew that this was his greatest weakness. That was because the amount of time he had spent training was truly too short. As for formation arrays and barriers, they were the ones that required the most time to study. The requirement of the Refining Flames Palace was that one must have a great understanding of the divine realm's formation arrays and barriers. As for the current Qingyu, his understanding of the immortal, devil and demon realm's formation arrays and barriers was only at the elementary level. What level is the illusion array outside the Bewitching God Temple? Qingyu asked. That's merely the most elementary level of the divine illusion array. Qingyu, just imagine, even people from the immortal, devil and demon realm, like you, are able to enter the divine illusion array. How elementary is this formation array? Uncle Fu said indifferently. This formation array was casually set up by Master in order to prevent people from the immortal, devil and demon realm from continuously disturbing the Bewitching God Temple. Qingyu took a long breath and then smiled. Forget about it. For the time being, I don't want to think about opening the Refining Flames Palace anymore. I'll open the Artifacts Palace first. In the courtyard, Qingyu and Uncle Fu walked to the entrance of the Artifacts Palace. The entrance of the Artifacts Palace was dark red in color. This entrance was not a double-closed door. In order to open this entrance, one could only open the entrance by slowly raising the entrance. Master had once said that the requirements to open the entrance of the artifact's palace are not high. The first requirement is to use one's divine awareness to find the mechanism of the entrance. As for the second requirement, after you find the mechanism, I'll tell you. Uncle Fu looked at Qin Yu confidently spread out his divine awareness. Qin Yu's divine awareness carefully covered the entire entrance, carefully inspecting every place. Again, nothing was gained. Just a reminder, the mechanism is on top of the entrance, said Uncle Fu indifferently. Qin Yu nodded his head. Then, he began to search even more carefully. Over and over again, the entrance was only that big. Qin Yu searched a couple of times without finding anything. Amen. Qin Yu's divine awareness locked onto two places below the entrance. Earlier, when his divine awareness swept past those two places, he felt that something was unusual. What are those two places for? A divine sword appeared in Qin Yu's hand. Qin Yu used the divine sword to knock on those two places. The origin energy within Qin Yu's body also passed through the divine sword and shot into those two places. Immediately, cyan rays of light shot out from those two places. At the same time, two protrusions emerged from those two places on the entrance. Very good. You've completed the first of the two requirements to open the artifact's palace. I originally thought that your soul was at the Soul Jin Dan realm. It seems that your soul has already reached the nascent soul realm, said Uncle Fu with a smile. Qin Yu looked at Uncle Fu with a puzzled expression. Soul nascent soul realm? Uncle Fu, you said that my soul has reached the nascent soul realm? Qin Yu asked again. Uncle Fu said matter-of-factly. As far as I know, in order to find the mechanism in the hidden room, one's soul must be at the level of a high-level deity. In order to find the mechanism, one's soul must be at the nascent soul realm. If you haven't reached the nascent soul realm, how could you find the mechanism? Qin Yu nodded his head to show that he understood. This Uncle Fu, is he not a heavenly deity expert? Qin Yu was puzzled. Qin Yu knew very well that he was only at the Soul Jin Dan realm. The reason why he was able to find the mechanism was most likely due to the assistance of Lu Xing's tears, which made it easier for his soul power to search. If Uncle Fu is a heavenly deity expert, he should be able to discover my soul realm. But if he can't, then he's not a heavenly deity. But I can't detect Uncle Fu's aura at all. What's going on? Qin Yu was puzzled. With Qin Yu's current soul realm, if he was a deity, Qin Yu would definitely be able to detect it. Qin Yu couldn't help but be puzzled. Qin Yu, you found this mechanism. These two protrusions have also appeared. Now what you need to do is to grab these two protrusions with both hands, and use your own strength to pull up the door, said Uncle Fu. Qin Yu woke up from his pondering. Pull up the entire stone door? Qin Yu confidently walked to the two protrusions. These two protrusions were only a foot above the ground. The distance between the two protrusions was just enough for Qin Yu to grab them with both hands. Qin Yu grabbed the two protrusions, and suddenly exerted force with both hands. Ha! Qin Yu shouted, and the muscles on his arms bulged. But the door didn't move at all. You can use your physical strength, or the energy within your body. You just need to open the door, Uncle Fu said from the side. At this moment, Qin Yu was half squatting, and his hands were firmly grabbing the two protrusions. 9 Transformations Force, Gold Force, Origin Force. Qin Yu poured all of his strength into his hands. Qin Yu's muscle strength was pushed to the limit, and Qin Yu's face turned red. Rise! Qin Yu roared. This was Qin Yu's strongest strength. Qin Yu's muscles started to tremble. One could clearly see his muscles bulging. However, the door merely slightly trembled, and did not have any reaction. To be able to make the door tremble, it means, as long as your strength increases to 3 times your current strength, I reckon you'll be able to pull up the entire door, Uncle Fu said from the side. Qin Yu placed the protrusion down in a discouraged manner. According to Master's settings, in order to open the door, one must reach the strength of a low-level heavenly deity. In order to find the mechanism, one's soul must reach the level of a low-level heavenly deity. Master had said, that one must at least reach this level in order to possess the qualifications to possess the bewitching god temple. Uncle Fu slowly said, "Low-level heavenly deity?" Qingyu was surprised. His strength was only a third of a low-level heavenly deity? Your soul is at the level of a nascent soul. If you continue to work hard, you should be able to increase your strength to the level of a low-level heavenly deity. Uncle Fu said. Qingyu was once again puzzled. Uncle Fu, do you have a soul? Qingyu suddenly asked. Qingyu was unable to think of any reason to explain the fact that he was unable to sense the slightest trace of Uncle Fu's aura. There was only a single possibility. Uncle Fu did not have a soul. However, was it possible for a person to not have a soul? Uncle Fu looked to Qingyu in shock. He then calmed down, smiled and said, "You've managed to tell? That's right, I do not have a soul." Chapter 463. Since he could not sense Uncle Fu's aura, Uncle Fu's strength should be far above his. However, Uncle Fu was unable to sense his true strength. It seemed contradictory. Qingyu could only think of one possibility. Uncle Fu did not have a soul. However, Qingyu could not believe this conclusion. Thus he blurted out a question. However, Uncle Fu's answer shocked Qingyu. "Uncle Fu, you really don't have a soul?" Qingyu asked again to confirm. Uncle Fu smiled and nodded. "Yes, I don't." "Why is it strange?" "How could that be? The most important thing for a human is the soul. How could a human exist without a soul?" Qingyu refuted. "Even a deity would die without a soul." Uncle Fu smiled and asked back. "Did I say that I'm a human?" Qingyu was stunned. "Uncle Fu, what do you mean?" Uncle Fu sighed and said, "I'm not a human. I'm a puppet refined by my master. Merely as a puppet, I belong to the higher class." Puppet. Qingyu listened carefully. In the divine realm, there are some weapon refining experts who are highly skilled in refining weapons. They can directly refine a body. However, with some simple wisdom, they become a puppet. Uncle Fu shook his head and smiled. Merely refining a puppet is extremely difficult. Firstly, refining a human body is difficult. Secondly, imparting wisdom is relatively difficult. Qingyu suddenly recalled his master Lei Wei's hometown, the technological universe where Earth was located. "I know of a cosmic space on the same level as the mortal realm. There is a kind of technological existence in that cosmic space. There is an intelligent existence in that cosmic space," Qingyu said. Uncle Fu shook his head and said carelessly, "When I was in the divine realm, I also knew of the existence of technological universes. They were merely ordinary universes on the same level as the mortal realm. They used some external matter to research the universe. That's really very low level. As far as I know, there is no technological universe that can break through the bindings of the mortal realm and reach the same level as the immortal devil and demon realm." Qingyu nodded. It would be difficult to achieve anything by only relying on external force and not cultivating one's own body. And that kind of intelligence is also very low level. It has no emotions and no self-awareness. It's just very low level. As for the puppets created by the experts of the deity realm, they appear to be no different from humans on the surface, Uncle Fu said. Indeed, from his conversation with Uncle Fu, Qingyu could feel that Uncle Fu was almost as intelligent as a human. "Uncle Fu, how can a puppet possess intelligence?" Qingyu asked. Uncle Fu shook his head and said, "I'm not too sure about this. Even in the God realm, there aren't many people who know how to refine puppets. In the God realm, those who have puppets as servants are all big shots with status and power." Qingyu suddenly remembered something. "Uncle Fu, look." With a thought from Qingyu, the sword immortal golem that Uncle Lan had bestowed upon him back then flew out from Qingyu's body. "Is this the golem you mentioned?" Qingyu still remembered that back when Uncle Lan gave this to him, he had said that it was a sword immortal puppet. This is a golem. Uncle Fu immediately became certain. After looking at it for a long time, he said, "The materials used for this golem cannot be considered precious. The toughness of its body is also not very strong. Merely, the expert who created this golem possessed extremely high craftsmanship. Using some ordinary materials, He actually managed to produce such a result. How strong is this golem? Qingyu asked. Uncle Fu said indifferently. Its entire body skeleton can be considered tough. I reckon it's comparable to a low-quality heavenly divine artifact. However, its muscles can only be considered to be ordinary. However, I feel that this golem's skeleton and muscles complement each other very well. It was refined extremely well. There are not many experts in the god realm who are capable of refining golems like this. Uncle Lan had followed the master of the bewitching god temple, Cheho Yuan, for all these years. Thus he knew a lot of things. However, this golem does not possess intelligence. Uncle Fu was a bit puzzled. I believe that for an expert to be able to refine such a harmonious body, it shouldn't be hard for him to bestow some simple intelligence to it. Qingyu was suddenly enlightened. The golem that Uncle Lan had given him was actually a golem from the god realm. Uncle Lan's original intention was to give Qingyu an additional guarantee of survival. It was very simple to not bestow some intelligence to the golem. Uncle Lan wished for everything to depend on Qingyu himself. Uncle Fu, how is this body of yours? Qingyu suddenly asked. Uncle Fu's eyes were flickering with confidence. He said, as the butler of the #1 artifact craftsman in the divine realm, there are not many golems in the entire divine realm that are stronger than me. The toughness of my body is definitely comparable to a high-quality, heavenly divine artifact. Qingyu was startled. High-quality heavenly divine artifact, how tough was that? Even ordinary high-level heavenly deities would likely not have such a tough body. Yet, Uncle Fu's body was actually this tough. However, what use is there in having a tough body? I merely possess the same level of intelligence as a human. However, I do not possess a soul and am not alive. Thus, I am unable to train or comprehend the spatial laws. With my strength, if I were to encounter a mid-level heavenly deity, I would have no choice but to be captured. Uncle Fu had a helpless expression on his face. Qingyu understood. Heavenly deity-level experts' comprehension toward the spatial laws were already very strong. When one reaches that level of expert, who would want to fight you in close combat? They would be able to kill you with their spatial control. This was also the reason why Uncle Fu admitted that he was inferior to mid-level heavenly deities. In the courtyard, a fallen leaf drifted past Qingyu and slowly landed on the ground. Qingyu turned around to look. Uncle Fu, what is the name of this large tree? Red tongue tree. It is a rare species even in the divine realm. Red tongue trees grow extremely slowly. This red tongue tree is already several billion years old, said Uncle Fu with a beaming smile. Qingyu looked at the red tongue tree before him in shock. This tree required 3 or 4 people to surround it. However, its height was only 20 meters or so. Its crown could also be considered to be very wide. Its diameter was over 100 meters. However, 20 meters in height required 3 or 4 people to surround it. If this was in Qinyu's hometown, in the great wilderness of the purple mystic star, then a tree of this height and thickness would likely be seen everywhere. In merely several tens of years, it would become this thick and solid. However, this tree was several billion years old. It's already this tall after such a long time? Qingyu was shocked. Don't look down on this red tongue tree. I can tell you with certainty that the value of this red tongue tree definitely surpasses that of your high-quality heavenly divine artifact, the divine spear waning snow. Uncle Fu said with certainty. Qingyu looked to the red tongue tree in amazement. Regardless of whether it is the trunk or the branches of the red tongue tree, they are all extremely tough and durable. Even if they are not refined, their toughness is still comparable to ordinary high-quality divine artifacts. If one were to refine them with the trunk or branches of the red tongue tree, it would be very easy to refine a low-quality heavenly divine artifact, or even a mid-quality heavenly divine artifact. Uncle Fu looked to the red tongue tree and said slowly, especially the core of the red tongue tree. With such a thick core, as long as one were to refine it slightly, it would definitely be comparable to a high-quality heavenly divine artifact. Qingyu came to a realization. This red tongue tree was filled with treasures. This red tongue tree. Back then, Master asked for it when he refined a grand mist spiritual treasure for the Thunder God King. Back then, The Thunder God King was extremely distressed for it. Uncle Fu said with a smile, "In the entire divine realm, I reckon that only the legendary ancient ironwood tree is more precious than the red-tongue tree." Qin Yu was unable to refrain his shock. He never expected that there would be an even stronger tree among the strong. There was actually an even more exceptional tree. That ancient ironwood tree is something that even Master has never seen before. That is, a branch of the ancient ironwood tree that he had seen before. It was a material that a high-level heavenly deity requested Master to help refine an artifact. Uncle Fu said. Qin Yu naturally understood. Even the master of the Bewitching God Temple had never seen it before. From this, one could imagine how precious the ancient ironwood tree was. "Uncle Fu, I am unable to open this artifact's palace. What should I do then?" Qin Yu looked to the stone door beside him. He felt a bit helpless in his heart. Uncle Fu still had a smile on his face. He said, "Don't worry, didn't I tell you already? Once you open the image left behind by Master, you will become the sole successor to this Bewitching God Temple. It's fine that you are unable to open it now. It won't be too late for you to come back when you have the ability to open it in the future. By the time I have the strength to open it, I reckon I'll have already arrived in the divine realm." Qin Yu said helplessly, "After you arrive in the divine realm, when your strength increases greatly, you can also find someone to help you descend to the lower realms." Uncle Fu consoled, "Is it very easy to descend to the immortal devil and demon realm from the divine realm?" Qin Yu was puzzled. Uncle Fu shook his head repeatedly. "Of course not. Other than God Kings and exalted celestials who are able to pass through space as they wish. As for the others, even people with extremely high statuses like Master would have to ask someone for help if they wished to descend to the lower realms." "Ask someone for help?" Qin Yu looked to Uncle Fu. He was waiting for Uncle Fu's answer. "It's still too early for you to ask that. When you reach the heavenly deity level and possess a status in the divine realm, you'll know how to descend to the lower realms. At that time, you merely need to spend some treasures to bribe someone," Uncle Fu said. Qin Yu smiled. "Bribe?" It would appear that human relationships are the same no matter where one goes. Qin Yu suddenly thought of a question. "Uncle Fu, didn't you say that people with the aura of the divine realm are unable to enter the Bewitching God Temple? When I arrive in the divine realm, even if I were to come to the immortal devil and demon realm, I reckon that the Bewitching God Temple would still not let me in." "Haha, you're wrong about that. Although the Bewitching God Temple blocks people with the aura of the divine realm, don't forget that I am the housekeeper of the Bewitching God Temple. When Master is not present, I am the housekeeper of the Bewitching God Temple. As long as I discover that you've come, I will naturally let you in," Uncle Fu said. Hearing what Uncle Fu said, Qin Yu heaved a long sigh of relief in his heart. The treasures left behind by the #1 artifact craftsman of the divine realm, even if he were to return to the divine realm, it would still be worth it. Qin Yu had heard that even the God Kings of the divine realm had once asked Cheho Yuan for help. If I have the chance, I must definitely learn Cheho Yuan's artifact crafting skills, Qin Yu thought in his heart. Qin Yu, with your current strength, it is impossible for you to open the Artifacts Palace and the Refining Flames Palace. You've already been to the front palace. I'll bring you to the last palace, the Transfer Palace. As Uncle Fu said those words, he walked forward. Qin Yu followed behind Uncle Fu and walked toward the Transfer Palace. The Transfer Palace was different from the Refining Flames Palace and the Artifacts Palace. The Transfer Palace's entrance was open. Furthermore, the Transfer Palace's entrance was extremely wide. The entrance that was only about 10 meters tall was nearly 30 meters long. Qin Yu and Uncle Fu stepped into the Transfer Palace's entrance. This place. Qin Yu looked at the Transfer Palace in confusion. The Transfer Palace was extremely strange. There weren't any rooms. There were only thick and solid pillars. Furthermore, there was a line of writing on each pillar. There are over 30 pillars here. What are they for? These pillars aren't even as tall as the roof. They're simply not used to support the roof. Qin Yu was puzzled. What were the 30 or so pillars for? Seeing Qin Yu's reaction, Uncle Fu said, Qinyu, you should know that the higher the level of the cosmic space, the more stable it is. Master's strength as a high-level heavenly deity was unable to break through the spatial barrier in the divine realm. However, with Master's strength, he was able to easily break through a spatial tunnel in the immortal devil and demon realm. That's right. The space of the immortal devil and demon realm is much more stable than the space of my hometown, the purple mystic star. Qinyu said. The space of the mortal realm was something that even level 9 heavenly immortals could tear apart. As for the space of the immortal devil and demon realm, even a level 9 immortal emperor would need to spend a great amount of effort and use a divine artifact to tear it apart. One could tell just by comparing their stability. Master is proficient in artifact crafting and puppet crafting. Similarly, he is also proficient in crafting spatial tunnels. These 38 pillars are spatial tunnels that lead to 38 cosmic spaces. Uncle Fu said indifferently. Qinyu, however, was startled. Lead to 38 cosmic spaces? How is that possible? Qinyu found it hard to believe. How is that not possible? Uncle Fu said indifferently. For a space at the level of the immortal, devil and demon realm, for example, it is extremely easy for Master to break through the spatial tunnel between the immortal, devil and demon realm. After all, Master is a high-level heavenly deity, only a step away from becoming a god king. Qinyu could only nod his head. A high-level heavenly deity's comprehension of space was definitely not something that the current him could imagine. How do you create a spatial tunnel? Qinyu suddenly asked. I don't know either. However, on the surface, a spatial tunnel looks more like a black hole. Uncle Fu suddenly said. Qinyu was stunned. Black hole? How is that possible? I am absolutely unable to withstand the gravitational force of a black hole. Qinyu knew very well that it was already difficult for his body to withstand the gravitational force of the 18-star Emperor-level dark star, much less a black hole. I only said that it looks like a black hole. However, it's not an actual black hole. Its gravitational force is much smaller than an actual black hole. Uncle Fu said with a light smile. Only then did Qinyu come to understand. Uncle Fu pointed at the towering pillars and said, These pillars are not solid. You can walk directly into them. You can directly enter them, and enter the spatial tunnel. As for which cosmic space it leads to, it is written on each of the pillars. 38 cosmic spaces, truly amazing. Qinyu began to inspect the pillars one by one. Dinosaur Realm, Milky Spiritual Pearl, was discovered on the Flowing Cloud Star. Illusion Demon Realm, 5 Skills Tablet Stone, was discovered on the Heavenly Blue Star. Mortal Realm's 3rd cosmic space, Black Tooth Spring Water, was discovered on the Kufeng Star. Each of the pillars stated the cosmic space it leads to as well as the precious materials found in that cosmic space. Among them, the cosmic spaces of the same level as the immortal, devil and demon realm were all named. As for the mortal realm's cosmic spaces, they were merely labeled with numbers. Evidently, there were too many mortal realms. Thus, there were no unified names for them. In order to find some peculiar materials, Master would naturally search through all of the cosmic spaces and create fixed spatial tunnels to allow Master to travel back and forth more easily. Of these 38 spatial tunnels that lead to cosmic spaces, 22 are of the same level as the immortal devil and demon realm. The other 16 are of the same level as the mortal realm. Uncle Fu said. At this moment, Qinyu grew silent. That was because he saw a line of words written on one of the pillars. Mortal Realm's 11th cosmic space, Purple Mystic Star, was discovered on the bipolar spiritual stone. Chapter 464. Purple Mystic Star. Seeing these words, Qinyu's entire body seems to have been struck by lightning. Various images flash through his mind like flickering lights and passing shadows. The scenes of his childhood training, the scenes of him chatting happily with his big brother and second brother in the hot spring, the scenes of him being together with his father. Go home. Qinyu felt his entire soul throbbing. That impulse to go home caused endless waves in Qinyu's calm heart. Qinyu was completely unable to suppress that impulse. Uncle Fu, you said that I can reach that universe by going in. Qin Yu asked. Yes, why? You want to go in? Uncle Fu saw Qin Yu's expression and couldn't help but ask. Qin Yu sighed deeply. The purple mystic star is the place where I grew up. Even though my current strength can tear apart space, creating a passage that can allow me to enter the mortal world is too difficult. I still don't have the strength to do so. Luckily, Senior Cheho has already refined this spatial passage. Qin Yu's heart was filled with joy. You can go in if you want. But Qin Yu, don't forget that when you have the strength to open the door to the artifacts hall, you must come back. Uncle Fu reminded. Qin Yu nodded. Don't worry, I will come back. After Qin Yu finished speaking, his gaze turned to the pillar in front of him. Taking a step, Qin Yu's entire person fused into the pillar and disappeared. In an instant the stars moved. Qin Yu felt his body moving at an extremely fast speed. All his eyes could see was the chaotic flow of space. This was something that Qin Yu often saw when he tore apart space. After about 7 breaths of time, Qin Yu felt the scenery in front of him change. The chaotic flow of space disappeared, and what appeared in front of him was an endless space. The gravity here is really weak. Qin Yu turned his head to look. Behind him was an unremarkable devouring hole. At first glance, this devouring hole looked like a black hole. It was just that the gravity of this black hole was too weak. Qin Yu understood that as long as he entered this black hole, he would be able to return to the bewitching God Temple. Qin Yu remembered this position in his heart. The purple mystic star shouldn't be too far from here. Qin Yu looked to the boundless outer space. He immediately spread out his divine awareness. Once he spread it out, Qin Yu discovered that the distance covered by his divine awareness was actually much greater than the distance covered by the immortal, devil, and demon realm. Qin Yu had a very clear feeling that as long as he released a little bit of energy, he would be able to tear apart this mortal world. Sure enough, it's a level lower than the space of the immortal, devil, and demon realm. Qin Yu waved his hand. Suddenly, a 10,000-meter-long spatial gully appeared in front of Qin Yu. The spatial gully constantly emitted a devouring power, but the devouring power did not affect Qin Yu. Moments later, the spatial crack was automatically repaired by the universe. It looks like Zhou Xian's methods back then were not that impressive. Qin Yu sighed. Back then, in front of him, Zhou Xian had been able to tear apart space with a wave of his hand. He had even been able to easily destroy an area of space. Back then, he had indeed been shocked. But now, it seemed that the space that Zhou Xian had destroyed was only the space of the mortal world. The space of the mortal world belonged to the lowest level of space. Tearing apart this kind of space was not that impressive, and the current Qin Yu could also easily do it. The purple mystic star is indeed not far from here. Qin Yu's divine awareness had already discovered the purple mystic star, which was half a galaxy away. With a great teleportation, Qin Yu disappeared from this part of space. Qin Yu stood on the Yellowstone star, looking at the huge star not far away, the purple mystic star. Back then, he had bitterly trained on the Yellowstone star, and finally comprehended the dark star realm. The distant purple mystic star, looking from the direction of the Yellowstone star, was clearly visible. Those were obviously the 2 polar regions of the purple mystic star. Qin Yu's figure shot towards the purple mystic star. As he got closer, Qin Yu also saw the vast sea on the purple mystic star, as well as the central chaotic astral ocean. In the north of the chaotic astral ocean, there was a small continent, which was the Qianlong continent. The large continent in the south of the ocean was the Tunglong continent. Looking at the regions of the purple mystic star, Qin Yu's mind flashed with scenes. Training on the Qianlong continent, fighting in the underwater cultivation world, heaven fire burning wildly on the Tunglong continent. Qin Yu stood in front of the purple mystic star, but he did not enter. After a long time, Qin Yu finally calmed down. He shook his head and smiled bitterly. The closer I am to home, the more timid I am. Then Qin Yu's figure disappeared into thin air. He had already entered the purple mystic star, Qianlong continent. It had been 4,000 years since Qin Yu flew to the immortal, devil and demon realms. In these 4,000 years, the Qianlong continent had experienced many changes of dynasties. No dynasty could last forever. The former Qin dynasty, the former Han dynasty, the former Song dynasty, all of these were only memories. Nowadays, the hidden dragon continent's mortal areas have been unified, which is very rare. The Tang Dynasty Empire. The founding emperor of the Tang Dynasty, Li Shi, fought for half of his life and finally unified the Qianlong continent. Except the forbidden land of humans, wilderness, which was the territory of the demon beasts. The Tang Dynasty Empire had been established for more than 200 years and was now incomparably prosperous. But because there were no enemies, the entire noble class of the empire was somewhat decadent. They pursued pleasure, beauty, longevity. This also caused the cultivators to be revered even more. Tang Dynasty Empire, Guangling City. Guangling City was one of the largest cities in the Tang Dynasty Empire. It was famous for its beautiful women and delicious food. The beautiful women attracted a large number of scholars, and the delicious food attracted the nobles. The prosperity of Guangling City was needless to say. In the evening, the streets and alleys of Guangling City were lit with lanterns. Nighttime was when the entire Guangling City was at its most prosperous. People were coming and going on the streets. Quite a few people were wearing brocade clothes and had servants following behind them. "Master, where are we going today?" a servant asked respectfully. The master with a big belly stroked his mustache with his little finger and said with a faint smile, "Today, let's go to the moonlight boat." "Yes, master," the servant said respectfully. But at this moment, a ray of brilliant light descended from the sky. It was a sharp sword. The face of the master with a big belly suddenly changed. He took a deep breath, and his big belly suddenly shrank. The master's right fist also turned red. With a strong gust of wind, the master fiercely punched out. The punch actually produced a sonic boom. Bang! The long sword shattered inch by inch. The assassin also spat out a mouthful of blood and immediately fled. The servant's eyes flashed with a cold light, and he was about to give chase. The master coughed and said coldly, "Don't chase. That person is only a copper plate assassin. It's useless to chase." "Someone from Heaven's Net?" The servant's face changed. "Master, then. Let's go back first. The person who wants to kill me actually only hired a copper plate assassin. He underestimated me too much." The master's face turned cold, and he immediately turned and left. The scene that happened on the street was seen by many people in the restaurants on the street. Heaven's Net? Heaven's Net still exists. A young man in black sitting in a restaurant muttered. This was Qin Yu, who had arrived at the Hidden Dragon continent. After returning to his hometown, Qin Yu was not in a hurry to go back. Instead, he wanted to familiarize himself with his hometown after 4,000 years. Qin Yu's divine sense covered the entire Purple Mystic Planet. On the Purple Mystic Planet, only his second brother Qin Zheng was still there. As for his father Qin De, his big brother Qin Feng, and Feng Yuzi, they were not on the Purple Mystic Planet. Even his little sister Xiao Lu was not on the Purple Mystic Planet. Qin Yu knew that his big brother's cultivation speed was relatively fast. In addition to the treasures he had left behind, 4,000 years was enough for them to ascend to the immortal realm. As for his second brother Qin Zheng, he was still in the mortal realm. This was something that Qin Yu had expected. After all, his second brother Qin Zheng's cultivation speed was the slowest among the three brothers. That person just now was a copper plate assassin from Heaven's Net. I didn't expect the hidden boss Wang to have such strength. The young masters in the restaurant began to discuss. He only hired a copper plate assassin. It seems that the person who wanted to kill boss Wang spent too little money. If he hired a bone ash assassin from Heaven's Net, who would be able to escape? Another young master said. Hearing that, Qin Yu was startled. Bone ash assassin? Back when he was still in the mortal realm, there was no such thing as a bone ash assassin. 4,000 years, the changes are truly enormous. Qin Yu lightly sighed. He then drank the wine in his cup. After so many years, the Hidden Dragon continent's winemaking techniques had improved a lot. Brotherly, I heard that the #1 martial arts family, Qin clan's eldest young Miss Qin Yu Tong, is about to arrive at Guangling City. Do you know? A young master said. Brother Gua, I already knew about this. Otherwise, why would I rush to Guangling City? Furthermore, I know that Miss Qin Yutong should be arriving at Guangling City tomorrow. Miss Qin Yutong is the #1 beauty in the martial arts world. If anyone can marry her, then not only will he have a beauty in his arms, but he will also be able to practice some of the Qin clan's top secret techniques. That's right. The Qin clan has existed for nearly 3,000 years. There is no need to doubt their strength. Immediately, a group of people surrounded this Qin Yutong and began to talk. Qin Yu began to have doubts. This Qin clan has existed for 3,000 years. It should have something to do with second brother, Qin Yu thought to himself. But according to Qin Yu's thoughts, his own clan could not be a small martial arts family. Also, just by using his divine sense, in the headquarters of the Qin clan, Yan capital, around his second brother Qin Zheng, there were quite a few tribulation passing experts. There were even quite a few loose immortal experts. The Qin clan's strength was comparable to some of the Tonglong continent's self-cultivation sections. On the second day, Qin Yu had also observed that Qin Yutong. She was indeed an outstanding beauty. However, Qin Yu did not pay too much attention to her. Afterwards, Qin Yu strolled around some of the cities in the Qianlong continent. 3 days later, Qin Yu arrived at Yan capital. Yan capital was the headquarters of the Qin clan. Even after so many years, it still was. The dynasties of the Qianlong continent changed, but every dynasty knew one thing: that there was a hidden large clan in the Qianlong continent, the Qin clan. This clan had the power to instantly destroy a dynasty. Therefore, Yan capital had always belonged to the Qin clan. The East Vanquishing Prince's mansion had already been renamed to Virtue Garden. For 4,000 years, the owner of Virtue Garden had always been a member of the Qin clan. Qin Yu stood outside the Virtue Garden's mansion by himself. I've returned, Qin Yu said softly. Other than Qin Yu, no one else dared to approach the entrance of the Virtue Garden's mansion. Whenever someone approached, the guards of the Virtue Garden would coldly glance at them. However, even though Qin Yu was standing there, the guards acted as if they didn't see him. Even some of the people who passed by also acted as if they didn't see Qin Yu. When light shone on the area where Qin Yu was, it would automatically distort. His comprehension of space was enough to allow Qin Yu to distort space and make the surrounding people unable to see him. Perhaps it might not be so easy in the immortal, devil and demon realm. However, in the mortal realm, Qin Yu was able to easily control the space. At this moment, a father and daughter walked over. The woman wore a veil while the father wore plain clothes. Even though the woman was wearing a veil, Qin Yu was still able to see her appearance. This woman was precisely the person that he had met before. The person known as the #1 beauty of the martial arts world, Qin Yutong. Father, why did the family head gather all of us branch families here? A beautiful young girl who appeared to be around 20 years old asked the cyan-clothed middle-aged man, beside her via voice transmission. The cyan-clothed middle-aged man replied indifferently via voice transmission. Don't ask. The family head sent out the order to gather us 3 days ago. It's definitely an important matter. This father and daughter pair were both using the voice transmission technique that internal experts were proficient in. With Qin Yu's strength, he was able to easily hear their conversation. The Virtue Garden's guard stopped the father and daughter pair. The father and daughter pair only showed an invitation card, and the guards immediately let the father and daughter pair in. Branch family? Never would I have thought that second brother would scatter the family. This is also good. Qin Yu stood at the entrance of the mansion and quietly watched. In a short day, many people had entered the Virtue Garden's mansion with invitation cards. These people were all alone, or had brought 1 or 2 people with them. Master, are you not coming in? A voice sounded in Qin Yu's mind. The voice transmission came from the ink qilin. Only the ink qilin, that was connected to Qin Yu's soul, would know of Qin Yu's arrival. Ink qilin, you've informed second brother of my return, right? Qin Yu asked via voice transmission. You're tuning in to the Earbook Haven YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.